I'd like to call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda deals with a supplementary agenda.
There is not one this evening.
Disclosure of pecuniary interest, direct or indirect, or general nature thereof, the items before council tonight. Seeing none. Our first item on the agenda tonight deals with planning services, administration. Your time.
Planning meeting process. The process to be followed for each application will be as follows. 1. The application will be announced by name of applicant, the type of application, the municipal file number, and its location. 2. The mayor will ask if there is anyone present other than the applicant or his or her agent with an interest in the application, and to indicate so by raising their hand. If there is no one present indicating an interest in the application, council will proceed as follows. 1. There will be no presentation by administration. 2. Administration will be asked if they wish to make additional comments regarding the report or recommendation. 3. Individuals or their agent present with an interest in the application other than the applicant will be asked to proceed to the podium, provide their name and address council with their comments, concerns, or questions. 4. Council will be asked if it has any questions of each presenter. 5. The applicant will be asked if he or she has any comments. 6. Council will be asked if it has any questions of the applicant. 7. Administration will be asked if they have any comments based on any discussion that may have occurred. 8. Council will be asked what action it wishes to take with regard to the application. Notice, if any person or public body that files an appeal of a decision of council in respect to the proposed applications does not make oral or written submissions to the municipal clerk of the corporation of the municipality of Chatham-Kent before the proposal is approved, they are not entitled to appeal a decision to the Ontario Municipal Board unless, in the opinion of the board, there are reasonable grounds to add the person or public body as a party to the appeal. Notice of passing. Information on council's actions tonight will be posted on the municipal website, www.chatham-kent.ca. All persons receiving notice of this meeting will receive a notice of the passing of a bylaw relating to any of the planning applications presented here tonight, if approved, including appeal procedures. Any other person who wishes to receive a notice of passing or a notice of council's decision must submit a written request to the municipal clerk.
Let's deal with the first item.
8A, applications for consent and zoning bylaw amendment. Joseph Burt Vandehogen, 21002 Schuberg Road, Howard, East Kent.
Is the applicant his or agent present? And if so, please raise their hand. I do not recognize the applicant. Is anyone present to this wishing to speak to this application? Please raise their hand. Then, seeing none, what shall council's direction be? Councillor Van Dam.
Mayor Hope, I'd be pleased to move recommendation 1 and 2 on this application.
It's been moved by Councillor Van Dam and seconded by Councillor Pinsino. Any comments or questions from council? Councillor Van Dam.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. Through you to planning, I noticed that this particular application had a wind turbine on it, and I was just wondering, with the sale of this property, how those wind turbine leases transfer, if that's a pretty seamless process or not.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. I do have some knowledge of this sale. The applicant is advised that there is a lease agreement for a wind turbine and also for a Met tower. Those leases can be assigned or transferred, and that is being dealt with through the transaction of this firm.
Very good. Thank you.
Further comments or questions from council? And seeing none, I would ask council now to consider the recommendations now brought before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Let's deal with the next item.
8B, application for consent and zoning bylaw amendment. Roy and Diane Cornell, 29136 Oakdale Road, Community of Camden, East Kent.
Is the applicant his or agent present? And if so, please raise their hand. I recognize the applicant. Is anyone present wishing to speak to this application? Please raise their hands. Then, seeing none, what shall council's direction be? Councillor Pinsino.
Thank you, Worship. Be pleased to move the recommendations.
It's been moved by Councillor Pinsino and seconded by Councillor Van Dam. Any comments or questions from council? And seeing none, I would ask council now to consider the recommendation now brought before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Let's deal with the next item.
Applications for consent and zoning bylaw amendment, Richard and Elaine Ross, 8838 Brookline and 8937 Everett's Line, Community of Chatham Township, North Kent.
Is the applicant, his or agent present? And if so, please raise their hand. I recognize the applicant. Is anyone present other than the applicant who wishes to speak to this application? Please raise their hand. Then seeing none, what shall council's direction be? Councillor Clare.
I'd be happy to move the recommendation 1 and 2.
It's been moved by Councillor Clare and seconded by Councillor Foss. Any comments or questions from council? And seeing none, I would ask council now to consider the recommendations now brought before you. Now I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Let's deal with the next item.
8D, applications for consent and zoning bylaw amendment, 1815513 Ontario Inc., 87 Chatham Street North, and 19 and 23 Maxwell Street, Community of Blenheim, South Kent.
Is the applicant, his or agent present? And if so, please raise their hand. I recognize the applicant. Is anyone present other than the applicant who wishes to speak to this application? Please raise their hands. Then seeing none, what shall council's direction be? Councillor Thompson.
Happy to move the recommendations.
It's been moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Vakudaran. Any comments or questions from council? Councillor Van Dam, please.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. Through you to planning. I had one question with regards to this application. I know there are 4 parts that get transferred over with the severance, but on the applicant's sketch, I could not find part 4 of the transfer.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. The applicant's sketch provided in the report shows a condensed version of an underlying sketch that was created some years ago. So on that sketch, between what's shown as parts 3 and 5, the surveyor has actually broken the property line in order to fit the property on a page. Otherwise, part 4 of that underlying plan would be shown between parts 3 and 5.
Okay, that explains why I couldn't see it. All right, thank you very much.
Further comments or questions from council? And seeing none, I would ask council now to consider the recommendation now brought before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Let's deal with the next item on the agenda.
8E, applications for zoning bylaw amendment, 2368523 Ontario Limited, Stephen Denies and Elizabeth Allen Denies, 10078 Longwoods Road, Chatham Township, North Kent.
Is the applicant, his or agent present? And if so, please raise their hand. I recognize the applicant. Is anyone present other than the applicant who wishes to speak to this application? Please raise their hand. 1. Okay. Administration, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. So, Council may recall this application was initially scheduled for the February 12th planning meeting, but we had requested it be postponed so we have an opportunity to have a public meeting, which was held on March 7th here in Chatham, which I'll discuss a little bit before. But just to highlight the application in general. So the application is to permit first of all, it includes 2 parcels. I'll step back here. There's a parcel here at the corner that already has the zoning in place for a medical marijuana production facility that was approved by council back in 2014. It's a small rural highway commercial zone lot, a little less than an acre in size, right across from the fire station in Chatham Township on Longwoods Road. Since that time, the applicant has approached the neighboring landowner, the 33-acre parcel that you see there, because there's an opportunity now to have a larger new purpose-built facility. The original plan was to refurbish that building that sits there today. So the application here is now to expand the zoning on the 33 acres that abuts this property to allow for a medical marijuana production facility. Part of this property is actually zoned hazard land along the river, which is not part of the application. It's really the part that's zoned A1, which you can see essentially entails everything from this line to Longwoods Road. So specifically, the intent of the application then is to immediately construct phase 1, which is the proposed facility down here, up to about 30,000 square feet, at least that's the initial build. This will be in a fully enclosed building. And this is what they currently have their license for this facility. There is a potential for another future production facility, which you see the larger blue box to the north there. At this time, they acknowledge it's not exactly known what type of structure this would be. It could be a greenhouse. It could be another enclosed building. So as of 2016, about a year and a half ago now, the federal government actually repealed what was the marijuana for medical purposes regulation and replaced it with the access to cannabis medical purposes regulation, or the ACMPR as it's known. Under this new regulation, individuals with a medical need who have the authorization of their healthcare practitioner are able to access cannabis in 3 different ways now. They can continue to access quality controlled cannabis by registering with a licensed producer, such as this facility here tonight. They can register with Health Canada to produce a limited amount for their own medical purposes, i.e. you can grow your own if you have a medical card. Or you can designate someone else to produce it for them, i.e. a designated person, which also has to register. So a designated person can grow up for 4 different people, so smaller facilities. Those aren't necessarily regulated by Health Canada, but what we're talking about here tonight, just so everybody's clear, is a licensed commercial facility. So with a licensed facility, they must be designed to conform to Health Canada's fairly stringent regulations. So being purpose-built, that's what the applicants feel. This facility can incorporate sophisticated state-of-the-art technologies aimed to improve all levels of cultivation, quality control, odor mitigation measures, etc. Specifically through the regulation, Health Canada does require these licensed producers to address the following: physical security, quality assurance, odor controls, security clearance, pesticide use, water controls, and also no storefront sale, no retail at the building whatsoever. So this is we'll look at conceptual rendering of what phase 1 would look like. And back in 2014, Council will recall that the municipality did undertake a detailed review on this subject, because there's a number of these potential proposals that came forward when the first regulation was put forth. So with that, there were official plan policies that were put into place in zoning regulations for proposed medical marijuana facilities. So these policies are generally supportive of medical marijuana facilities, subject to certain criteria that's laid out within in the policies itself. The main thing is that to permit marijuana for medical purposes facilities within the employment areas or industrial designated areas in the official plan, rural industrial designations, and agricultural area designations, such as this property is designated agricultural area. Sorry, speak up. Okay.
It's okay. You're speaking to this way anyways.
Okay. So as I mentioned, the subject lands here are designated agricultural area in the official plan, and subject to policies outlined in Section 2.7. The report does outlay those various criteria, some of them being it should be located on a collector or arterial road, such as Longwoods. Should be access to water if available, access for sanitary sewers. It can be, you must have a septic system, obviously, that's designed accordingly to handle any septic. The police always review the locations and comment back whether they have any issues with the proposed location. One of the main criteria are setbacks, which the zoning bylaw does set out as well. In this case, the zoning sets out a setback of 100 meters that's required for a proposed building and a structure to be used as a facility from a residential zone boundary. The closest residential zone boundary in this case is on the south side of the Thames River on former Harwich side of the road, or approximately 400 meters from where this proposed facility would be located. Other dwellings in the area are actually zoned agricultural. They're not specifically zoned residential. They're primary, lots that might have been severed off a farm as a surplus dwelling, for instance, or traditionally are zoned agricultural. Technically, there's no setback required from these. However, the applicant is respecting a 100-meter setback from those couple of dwellings that are closest by as well. So as mentioned, after notice was issued last time, there was a number of submissions and phone calls that were received. I think just for clarity, there was a bunch of letters that were emailed to council tonight. Those are actually letters that were submitted when this was came before us last time on February 12th. I haven't received any new written submissions, but obviously there's one person here to speak tonight. So those were comments that were received initially back in February when we put out the notice the first time. So on that note, so the main issues I'll summarize here, and certainly others can speak if there's further issues that I haven't identified. But odor was the one concern that people had in the neighborhood. They're concerned about how odor is controlled and mitigated. Because marijuana plants, as they mature, they can or will submit a skunk-like smell when they're in that budding stage. This was more of a concern that was noted for the Phase 2 building that I showed you, concerns that if it was going to be a greenhouse structure instead of an enclosed structure, could that actually be mitigated in a greenhouse structure? Lighting impact, again, if it's in a greenhouse structure, marijuana facilities tend to use more light, more intense light for their production and run year-round. So again, if it's a greenhouse structure, how can those impacts be mitigated? There's certainly ways that can be done, which I'll get into as well. Just the scale and overall size of the development. And then the adequacy of municipal regulations and bylaws that are currently in place. As I just walked through with council, we do have a official PAM policy framework and zoning regulations for setbacks that are in place. I can tell you I've reviewed a number of others that are out there. Several have adopted ours or used our similar setbacks. And maybe just for a little benefit of council as well, actually last week I attended a conference in Toronto, which is actually called Municipal Issues in the Licensing of Recreational Cannabis. So at that conference, it was a well-attended conference. It was really, there's representatives from Health Canada there. There's representatives from the province there. There were people there from Portland, Oregon, and Denver, Colorado, where they are currently, obviously, have permitted recreational use of marijuana, it was interesting to hear their perspective. I don't want to digress, but I just want you to know, so along with these current regulations that are in place, as many of you are aware, last week the Senate approved that the Cannabis Act that's in front of the federal government right now has been now referred to the Standing Committee, and their goal is to have a final decision or royal assent by June 7th is the date, if that continues on in that path. From that point, we'll see new regulations introduced by Health Canada, which I think, from their perspective, whether marijuana is being sold for recreational purposes or medical purposes, licensed facilities will still be subject to the same stringent regulation regime that they are now. They don't really distinguish between medical and recreational product at the end of the day. It's just that licensed producers will still have to adhere to those same regulations. That being said, as many of you know, there's still debating a number of other things that may come out of this. There could be what they call micro facilities as well, like smaller scale facilities. It's hard to say what the rules will be around designated growers. And as you all probably heard, there's a potential that there could be open growing of marijuana in the future as well. What I heard was I don't think that'll be the first phase of this, but it very well could be something that's considered in the years to come. And then there's also the allowance, and the province to date has not said anything differently, but from a personal perspective, anybody could potentially grow up to the 4 plants of their own as well. So I just want to give a little background. So, and when I talked to some colleagues as well that have commercial production facilities, the issue hasn't really become these licensed production facilities causing any land use concerns. It's the one that I talked about where you can have people designate to grow for you. They haven't really been regulated to date. It may be deemed as unconstitutional to do so, but they're not regulated to the same rigorous standards. They're smaller in scale, but you could very well have several thousand square feet of marijuana plants growing in a, whether it's a barn or an older or greenhouse to some extent. So some areas are experiencing more of those than they are of these types of facilities. So I don't want those lines to get blurred in between what we're talking about with this application and these other types of facilities. So just back to the meeting we had on March 7th that was hosted by the applicants. There was about 35 people in attendance. It was well attended. A couple of councillors were there. I was there to kind of give an overview as well of the municipal policies and framework. So the applicants did a good job giving their background in terms of why this location, who they are, what this facility will be, how they will mitigate odor concerns, and try to address any other concerns of the neighborhood as well. There's a lot of question and answers, which was good. So based on that public input received, I kind of came away with, I want to say there's general consensus, but we left the meeting thinking that there didn't seem to be a lot of serious concerns with phase 1, but phase 2, the potential greenhouse, larger structure, there were still people that had concerns of what that building might be in the future. So with that in mind, the approach that we've taken here is to recommend, in discussions with the applicant as well, that we zone the lands to a holding zone. So the first phase would allow immediately for the marijuana production facility as permitted use, up to a maximum of 30,000 square feet in an enclosed building referred to as phase 1 on that sketch. It would then allow for an additional 120,000 square feet for phase 2, but only once certain conditions to remove the holding symbol have been removed. And what are those conditions? That certainly that the actual type of structure and facility is identified, and a site plan application is also submitted, but also to have some further public consultation once that is identified with the same people that were notified before. So that's the recommended approach. I also should point out that both phase 1 and phase 2 are subject to site plan control. Within site plan control, we can certainly require that, even though Health Canada regulates it, within the agreement that the appropriate odor mitigation and ventilation plan be submitted part of the application. Phase 1 isn't much of an issue with regards to lighting, but lighting is something we can certainly control if it's a greenhouse structure in the future. And then the question was asked, well, what if this gets sold to somebody else down the road? At least with the site plan control agreement, it's registered on title. It's enforceable to any future landowners as well. And one last note, there is a general provision in our bylaw right now that prohibits any noxious uses. This can be related to any offensive or dangerous by reasons of emission of odor, smoke, dust, noise, gas, fumes, vibration, or refuse matter. Now, with that in mind, that it has to be, I can tell you right now that the MOE does not consider odor from marijuana as an adverse effect under the Environmental Protection Act. And also under the Normal Farm Practices Act, which OMAFR is still considering what marijuana will be in the future. Is it going to be a normal farm practice? Because they're protected as well from certain aspects in farming as well. So what I'm saying, there is that provision in our bylaw that allows us to enforce. If anything becomes a noxious use, we have the ability to enforce that under the zoning bylaw if it's deemed noxious. So with that, the recommendation here tonight is that Council approve zoning amendment application D14 CH 4617-0 to rezone the subject lands at 10078 Longwoods Road in part of Lot 12, Concession 1 in the community of Chatham Township to a holding agricultural 1301 H A1 1301 zone that would immediately allow for a marijuana for medical purposes production facility as a permitted use in the agricultural zone up to a maximum of 27 87 square meters or 30,000 square feet in an enclosed building referred to as Phase 1. And then secondly, allow for the additional 11,148 square meters, 120,000 square feet for a medical purposes production facility, referred to as Phase 2, once certain conditions to remove the holding symbol have been met, and adopt the implementing bylaw. So I believe with that, we'll take any questions. We had one speaker, I think, raised.
Before I entertain questions from council, Bruce, I know that it'll be part of the site plan approval, but the threshold is $1 million on the site plan. Does that go back in front of council?
Your Worship, the threshold is $2 million.
Is it $2 million?
And
Okay.
both phases are well over that, so it'll be back before council.
So I just want to make sure that we're clear. I mean, I would take it as site plan approval be required, but we're estimating that 30,000 square feet is, based on the drawings, will be extensive cost to build the building. So it would have to come back before council for a site plan approval, and that's correct. Okay. Councilor Verkuttern first.
I guess what I was asking, well, I attended the open meeting there a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about the property. I know you're talking about the building there, right? The square footage, we also discussed just allowing the property to be, 50% of it to be zoned properly, and the addition would be done at a later date, the property, right?
Correct.
I think it was, we're down to what, 23 acres or something like that? Am I right? The parcel, the whole parcel is what, 35?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just getting the pen up there. Thank you, Your Worship. So the whole parcel, including the hazard land zone at the back, is 33 acres. When you apply the 100-meter setback from, we're going to adhere to that up here.
Yeah.
And then, as we said, the setback, I don't know, I'm just drawing. So really the building area would be no more than this here. I figured out quickly, no more than probably half of that property could potentially be developed. What I'm suggesting here is initially there's a holding zone on it that only allows for this first phase here. And then such time as they come forward with their future plans, they would have to come back to council and have another public session to discuss this phase up here.
And that allows about 50% of the lot vacant.
That's correct, yeah.
And in order to, this is the question that came up over there as well, in order to allow greenhouses instead of the buildings, would that be allowed without zoning on the balance of the property?
Just regular greenhouses or for marijuana?
Well, greenhouses, yeah, of course.
Well, it's a difference because we have different setbacks for marijuana facilities. So just with the setbacks that apply, that's what I'm saying, their envelope is going to be very restrictive past that second phase. Yeah.
So I'm right by saying it'd be 50% would be zoned today to allow this?
Yeah.
And what about the balance of the property? What will
Yes.
the zoning be on there?
Technically, the zoning
This has
would-
been the biggest question I got from the group here.
So what we're saying is, I'm drawing all these lines here. So this is the piece here that would be zoned, technically, that's all the agricultural zone property. But there's 100-meter setback that applies to this lot to the north, which is fairly substantial. That reduces it down to somewhere in here. And then we're further limiting it. So the first phase is being allowed here tonight, or would be allowed.
Okay, just wanted to clear it up.
Okay.
Okay. Councilor Leclerc, followed by Councilor Pinsino.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Bruce. Thanks, Bruce. That really explains a lot, and I like the part two, that going forward, if not everything is met, then it will not happen. Has there any growing been occurring in the building that's on that property now? Has any harvesting been going on?
Yep. So the applicants, they are registered, as I called it, as a designated facility to grow a small amount. And I'm sure they can certainly comment to that. They'd like to make a small presentation of what's going on there.
Okay, well, I was just, where I was going was, has there been any complaints to date? If there has been an operation operating? Before the application was made, were there any complaints made to anyone that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of, no. Not specifically the municipality, anyway.
Okay. The police know of this happening? Any feedback from them, negative, positive? They're good to go with that?
Yep. Chief Khan actually responded that he's good with the location of the facility.
And the open house, I was away. I couldn't make it. I did want to make it cold. So as of right now, I don't see anything wrong. So thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Mayor Hope.
Councillor Pinsino.
Thank you, Worship. So as it stands right now, nothing's changed for that original piece of property. They could build this, right? Phase 1.
That's correct, yeah.
So basically all we're doing is adding this other piece, but we have control with the hold as to where it goes. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Oche.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've read complaints on the smell of this facility already. So it sounded like you were saying they're going to bring in a new system to keep the smell down. Is that correct?
Yes. So in very simple technical terms, Your Worship, it's basically a carbon filtration system, but yeah, it'll be equipped with odor reduction technology, this new facility.
It doesn't have it at the moment?
No, they don't have it at the moment in this older structure.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no further comments from council, I'm going to ask, Councillor Van Dam, please.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. Through you to planning, Bruce, I want to compliment you on the amount of work that you've done with this file. I think in some ways you went above and beyond, and by implementing the holding pattern, I think that's a positive step forward. However, I do have some concerns as to how we move these type of applications forward on a continuous basis within this municipality and become a bit of a trendsetter. And I know that we have ventilation plans and we have lighting plans and odor plans that the applicant must follow. But through Mayor Hope to you, can we introduce bylaws to put some level of guarantee to the homeowners, to the people that live and work around this area to give them more peace of mind? And to that, I know Leamington, for instance, they have a couple of these applications come forward. I don't know what they have. I know in the city of Kamloops, BC, they've implemented a very specific bylaw for these grow-type operations. And I don't know if we could introduce something similar to what Kamloops has done so that we can be on the cutting edge of developing enforceable bylaws that set us apart from other jurisdictions while still recognizing agriculture as important, but also development. And I guess my last comment before you comment is I can't help but wonder sometimes if the federal government has left us astray on this, in the sense that, you know, many times I've heard you say it's all up to Health Canada. But what has Health Canada and what has the federal government done to assist you in this process? I know from the enforcement side, if you consume too much, what can police do? And right now, the golden answer isn't there. So those are my concerns, and you know, I guess it's part of overall, if we are to look at these projects continuously as a municipality, can we do better?
So what I would suggest, certainly, if we're going to review the framework of production facilities, I definitely would suggest to council, let's see where the Cannabis Act goes in June, because we don't know what the regulations are going to be around that. We know what the regulations are for medical facilities. Are there other tools in the toolbox that could be potentially used? To say you do have zoning, you do have site plan control, and that's what I've kind of presented tonight, that we can, you know, we do have those mechanisms to control those things that we talked about. They're, you know, under the municipal act, there's certain things you can do around nuisance and odor. I just don't know how it would trump anything that we're saying here tonight from my perspective. I know I've looked at some of those other examples as well in policy. I think our policy basically says to, you know, to eliminate those impacts, you must adhere to the setbacks that we've set out in the bylaw, right? I did talk to a planner from Norfolk County. They essentially permit them similar to our setbacks. They were giving some thought to looking at the designated grower facility, the smaller ones as well, to see how they might regulate those. So I'm keeping in contact with them in the future to see what best practice there is out there. A number of municipalities simply treat them like a greenhouse. Like if a greenhouse is permitted, this is permitted. That's what Leamington does currently. I talked to them as well. Where greenhouses are permitted, as you know, a greenhouse would be permitted on this property today if one came forward, if there was an application as such. So I guess I can tell you tonight, I'm certainly going to keep on top of it because I know it's an issue. It's not just around planning. There's lots of various issues from a municipal perspective, I think, that we need to be aware of in terms of the new legislation when it comes forward. Okay.
Seeing no further comments, thanks very much, Bruce. I'm going to ask the person wishing to speak, please come to the microphone, please state your name, your address, and please address council.
Thank you, Mayor Hope and Council. My name is Jared Atkinson, and I live just on the south side of the proposed site at 10063 River Line. As I mentioned, I have residential property on the south side of the Thames River. My home, along with 5 other neighboring properties, abut the south side of the proposed site. First of all, I'd just also like to take a moment to recognize Bruce McAllister for his efforts in assisting me in addressing some of my concerns. I very much appreciate what you've done, Bruce, and thank you very much for everything so far. With me having a property directly south of the proposed site, I have some concerns that this project could impact the quality of life, especially when it comes to potential odor and stray lighting that could be emitted from the facility. At the end of the day, I do not want to see this project affect my family or my neighbor's ability to enjoy the outdoors, as these facilities have been known to emit a skunk-like odor. In addition to the odor concerns, stray light emissions can also be a major issue with a greenhouse-style structure, which could be a potential for the Phase 2 expansion. When proper measures are not taken to block the lighting from an existing greenhouse, especially at night. I really don't want any lighting reflecting off my children's windows as they try and sleep at night. As part of the recommendations put forth by planning services, Curative Cannabis would be required to submit both a ventilation plan and interior and exterior lighting plan as a part of the requirements in obtaining final approval. I very much appreciate that this has been included as a requirement. I would like to get some clarification on what the procedure would be if the agreed upon plan, whether it be for lighting or ventilation or odor control, if it's not as successful as all parties anticipate that it might be. Is Chatham-Kent and the residents forced to accept the outcome because the plan was accepted? And who would enforce this and ensure modifications are done to ultimately eliminate any odor or stray lighting from the facility? In the cannabis world, which seems to be expanding at an alarming rate, there are mergers and acquisitions happening all the time, and there are many growers under construction now and gearing up for production as soon as possible. Once they all get producing and the dust settles a bit on the industry, there could potentially be a flood on the market of product. And that's just me speculating. But there could be a potential that some growers are pushed or choose to supply the recreational market instead. Right now, we are relying on Health Canada's ACMPR regulations and their inspectors to inspect and ultimately hold curative cannabis accountable if they do emit odors from the facility. If, for example, they choose to supply the recreational market or some other unknown market, is there a chance that Health Canada regulations would not apply, and therefore there would be no one to hold them accountable? And would Chatham-Kent even allow them to grow for recreational purposes? A question for a curative cannabis rep, if there's anybody here. In the community presentation on March 7th, Curative noted that plant waste will be disposed of off-site by a licensed handler as per Health Canada guidelines. I didn't realize that this was an ACMPR guideline, as I know of a cannabis grower in Leamington that is shredding the plant waste along with the waste potting mix and spreading it on the access land at the backs of their facilities. Can Curative Cannabis reconfirm that this will not be the case at this facility and that all waste will be disposed of off-site? One of the other questions that was raised was whether this existing facility has been producing so far. My question, now that they have been, I would like to know how many inspections they've had at that existing facility to hold them accountable for any odor issues or any inspections of any kind that hold them accountable to some type of regulation. Ultimately, I would like to see Chatham-Kent adopt a blanket bylaw for this application that would ensure that any facility built on this property does not negatively affect neighboring properties or quality of life. This way, if there are any issues, regardless of who regulates the industry, the residents can come to Chatham-Kent and be ensured that the matter is dealt with. And the last couple of comments that I had, I guess, that I just from what I saw in Bruce's presentation here, was one of the questions was about the 4,000 square foot facility. I don't believe that there was room on the existing site, the small commercial parcel, to build the whole proposed 26,000 square foot facility. They would have to merge those two properties, correct, Bruce? And then my other question, I guess, was in regard to the size. In reading the planning agenda here, it looked like the maximum that they could build on this site was going to be limited to 150,000 square feet. But as I sat here, I almost started to wonder whether there's a potential for a phase 3 in this whole setup as well. We always go back to the 100-meter setback, which for a greenhouse operation, I'm not sure that 100 meters is nearly enough, but in that case, with a 100-meter setback, could they potentially go to the west and keep a 100-meter setback around that westerly home, and then carry on 100 meters, say, off the west property line, and potentially have a lot more room for expansion? Again, on the south side, they could pretty well build up to right up to the hazard zone land and still maintain a 100-meter setback from my property. So I just want some clarification, I guess, as a last final comment as to, is 150,000 square feet, is that it, or are we talking a lot more than that?
Bruce, is there some of those you can answer right now?
Start with the last question first. There,
the last question was: is this 150,000 square feet?
There potentially is more room to expand further on this site, but the application as presented tonight caps it at the 150,000. So any potential future plans will be going through this whole process again, rezoning, etc. But it ultimately depends, obviously, on the what kind of design, final design they have on the second phase too, how it could be worked. But the answer is yeah, there's probably room for some expansion, but it's not in your recommendation for that tonight. Other question was around, I had it written down here, sorry, Jim. Is the site big enough for that first phase today? No, they certainly could build a fairly significantly sized building on that current lot, but not the size that they're hoping to build. That's the reason why they're here tonight. The opportunity is bigger than what could be built on that one lot in the corner there. And the other question was I guess a blanket bylaw. I honestly don't know, other than those noxious use provisions we have in our thing, other than, frankly, that council doesn't permit these facilities in the municipality. I don't know how else to tell you that to truly mitigate this type of use, is this whether or not you want them in the community, because otherwise I don't know what another blanket bylaw, such as to say there's no issues on neighbors. I think we've controlled that through regulation, zoning, and site plan.
I think on that question, because there's some comments I want to make, but I'm glad this is going to Senate committee, because a lot of the stuff that we're discussing has to be something the Senate needs to hear, which I'll talk a little bit later. Mm-hmm. I think because we are in the forefront, both from the first initial planning and now into this, and where does it go? I mean, does it just the industrial purpose? Is it designation of individuals growing it in their garages or whatever? We need to make sure that the Senate, who is going to be passing this bill for recreational purposes, at least starts to hear what we have to say, because, the industrial size of it I'm more comfortable with than I am with a smaller size, which could be right beside your house, never mind, which then is going to smell no matter if there's a few less plants, it's still going to smell. So I'd like to wait on that comment, because there is some comments I have when it comes to this that I think an action plan we need to do in coinciding what's going on with the Senate. So, is there any further comments or questions or clarifications that needs to be asked? Councillor Wesley?
Just in listening to the presentation, I know there's a question on waste, which I think Curative will answer to, but I think, Bruce, the one question that was asked that I think falls under you is that if we put in place plans to deal with odor and things of that nature, what happens if it doesn't work? What recourse do the citizens have if some plan we put in place with them just doesn't work?
So there's two things. As I mentioned at the start, Health Canada is the regulator on this, and they require that no odor emissions are allowed, and they will inspect and audit, and if they're not in compliance, potentially shut down the facility, right? What we're saying is we'll also put those in our own planning documents as well, that there must be odor controls, kind of as a double check, frankly, in terms of what Health Canada already has in place. Okay.
Further comments or clarification to the presenter? Councillor Brock-McGregor, please.
It was just to Bruce quickly on that last question. So if the Health Canada regulations changed and we already had that no permitted odor, would that still be in place in site plan and still enforceable by the municipality?
That's correct. That's correct, Your Worship. The other piece of it is in talking to Health Canada. So I think where they're going, whether it's recreational or medical marijuana, if you're applying to be a licensed producer, these regulations are still going to apply, and maybe there'll be even some other regulations that are put in place for marijuana facilities.
Okay. Further? Councillor Foss, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Bruce, and I'm not sure you can answer it, but he questioned the fact of inspections, and I don't know if you know whether the facility has had the inspections, or is there a frequent number of inspections that's done on a yearly basis or whatever?
I was actually going to have the applicant speak to that question, because it's better coming from them than our staff answering the site visits. If that's okay with you, Councillor Foss? Okay. Yeah. Seeing no further, thank you very much.
One more question?
Yes.
As a part of the ACMPR regulations, I had spoke with the Office of Medical Cannabis in regards to the process of doing submitting a complaint if there happens to be an issue, and basically what they told me was that the complaints are based on a priority. So they take more priority to a complaint that might deal with a quality issue or an issue where there might be some product going out the back door and that type of thing. And some of those types of complaints would be given more weight than an odor complaint. So I guess my final question would be, if we go through that process and we just, time and time again, we just don't seem to be getting anywhere, is there something that we can fall back on with Chatham-Kent after we've taken those steps to say, hey, you know, we've been down this road half a dozen times, and we can't get any answers, and it's just the same old thing. What can I come to Chatham-Kent and say, hey, I've tried, and you know, I'm not one for ruffling feathers to begin with, but at some point I would love to be able to come to Chatham-Kent and say, hey, we need some help, and somebody within the municipality can help me out. That's ultimately
I'll
what
let Bruce answer.
Yeah, so to that question, I did talk directly with the Health Canada representative, and several others raised issues, you know, around odor. They reiterated that they take those complaints very seriously. They strive for zero odor. I think it's maybe even more on there after they heard from a whole list of people on this issue. The other piece, I think that's why we've suggested also be in our site plan agreement. So, to Jared's point, even if the complaint were to come through the municipality as well, as you know, the municipality can kind of force the regulator that way as well, is why we're doing that, to act on something if they know the municipality is also making this complaint. Okay.
So, and also, I think one of the things we need to do as we go forward, this is new for everybody, is to make sure that the Senate hears what we have to say from a municipal planning and enforcement and process. I think everybody's walking on this new. I think the Senate committee talked about 6 different areas or 8 different areas which it had to focus on. And I think what you raised are valid concerns. Who's going to be responsible if they're too backed up? How do we deal with it in a timely fashion? What is the time fashion associated to it? But I mean, like you, we have to make sure as a municipality we're putting pressure on those who are actually making it a law to make sure they give us the tools that we need in order to execute and implement standards. And as Bruce indicated, site plans will be that one that we'll be able to utilize. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to ask the applicant to please come forward. Be so kind as to state your name and your address. And hopefully after your presentation, I know you probably have a set presentation. I hope maybe you'll be able to listen to some of the concerns that were raised by the one resident and maybe be able to try to address those at the same time, if you don't mind.
My name is David Schmidt. I reside at 3513 Homewood Lane. That's in London, Ontario.
I'm Scott Fitzgerald. I reside at 829 Cresthaven Crescent, London, Ontario.
So before we start the presentation, as well, just to thank Mayor Hope and council members for the opportunity to be here. It's been 4 years since we came before you, so we've had a little bit of exercise in patience, but we've gone this far, and I think we're just about, the finish line is about to become the start line. To echo Councillor Van Dam's comments earlier, we'd also like to thank Bruce for a very thorough, objective and impartial and fair assessment and handling our issue, so much appreciated as well. Hopefully we'll get a positive outcome and we'll complete construction. Again, just to further your point, if there's anything we can do to assist with the bylaw creation. We're open door policy to help. We've really understood this industry, the sector, all aspects of it, so we can definitely assist with that. We did embark and undertake the public consultation and the public information session on some good advice, and it gave us a lot of, there were some very good questions, so we came back and developed some good answers for that, and it made us kind of reinforce and look to develop our methodologies and process even better. Excuse me. We acknowledge Mr. Atkinson and Ms. Atkinson's concerns, of course, so we appreciate and understand them. And again, that just kind of gives us further motivation to make sure that we stay in compliance as we've tried to throughout this entire process, and we'll continue to be as thorough and as responsible as we can. So I'll start with we'll go through what we've created in terms of a slide kind of presentation, and I apologize if it's a little bit lengthy. If at any point there's any questions, just please stop and maybe raise your hand. We're happy to answer them if something comes up. If it's too long-winded, then press the trapdoor button and we'll go away. So just a little bit of background on ourselves. I come from a clinical background of running multidisciplinary clinics. I don't think you'll be able to read that font there, so we're happy to email this, a copy of this to anyone who would like to do a detailed read. It's strictly in the context of what's happened since Health Canada created a federal framework for licensed production, and while we've awaited licensing of our own, we were able to successfully license another facility in St. Thomas, Ontario, and while we've done that, I've been focusing on patient education and the clinical and prescription management of cannabinoid therapy. So we're well over 30,000 patients or Canadians on cannabis therapy, and we'll speak a little bit more about the track record on that. I feel that's given us a lot of buy-in and acceptance, in the sector, and has gone this application to where it is with the regulator with Health Canada. Scott, maybe just a word on yourself.
I'm Scott Fitzgerald. I'm from the area here. My family farm is about 5 minutes away in Everett's. Growing up in Chatham-Kent, I became a firefighter when I was 21, when I was fairly young, and I moved to London from there. Involved with David here in this application originally, and since then we did receive a second license in St. Thomas, Ontario. Currently, I'm the Director of Operations for Medical Marijuana Group Corporation in St. Thomas, Ontario. So I am running that facility now, and then we'll hopefully migrate over to this one. So gaining a lot of experience there on the regulatory side and the operational side, designing the facility and now operating it, and working with Health Canada and the regulators to make sure that we stay compliant.
So just a little bit of history, and so just a little bit of a high-level overview. I'll go really quick here. So again, just really understanding the medical management of cannabis therapy. The track record has been good. It's all about safety and efficacy. And again, for clarity, we exist in the medical framework right now. There is a recreational framework that's ahead of us. And to answer actually Mr. Atkinson's question, he said, what happens when we decide to be recreational? We actually don't. The same framework, the ACMPR, that's a federal program, that's a Health Canada program, manages commercially licensed production, and commercially licensed production is the single sole legal source of cannabis product for both the medical and soon the recreational marketplace. So those regulations will stay in place, and to my understanding, sometime in the summertime we see the Cannabis Act. That's going to be the one catch-all framework that governs all cannabis, both medically and recreationally. But the mandate of the regulator of the government has been to eliminate black market production and put everything under the banner of commercially licensed production, again with a focus on purity, cleanliness, GMP, good manufacturing practices, and so forth. We've are proposing a purpose-built facility and something that the word state of the art is used. To give a little bit of color, we phase 1 and phase 2 would be about a $35 million budget for a build. So I mean we're way out of our league, but we're happy to take on the project and challenge that comes with that. So halfway through this application process, we entered into a partnership with a company called Whedon Income, or Canvas Whedon. So what they've done is really put the application onto like the next level, and I'll give a little bit of understanding of how that's strategic and how the community that we're now associated with would benefit from that partnership. So Canvas Whedon, and I'll use the term we, is to support cultivation. And then just really kind of set the standard in Canada. So we continue the second, third, and fourth generations of licensed production. We'll be the 16th, and it's a bit of a moving target, but the 16th fully funded project under the Whedon banner. And I'll kind of elaborate a little bit further on what that means. The model is pretty simple. It reduces operational and therefore reputational risk for the licensed producers, ensures continuity and quality and consistency of supply to the marketplace, whether that's medical or recreational, through a number of different excuse me, processes and oversights that are put into place. Again, the highlights of that Whedon platform that we're going to be engaged with is the second tier of audit and oversight, a very sophisticated construction and program management and infrastructure team that uses failures of other organizations to better and improve efficiencies, ensure that we stay on time and on budget. Brand building expertise is really just about a sustainable business model, so that there's not a facility that has overage or is incapable of market share and penetration to the market. Regulatory financial guidance is, again, just a series of checks and balances and holds us accountable. And then the sharing of genetics and the science and product development side, along with cultivation practices, just further kind of refines the model and elevates this project and this licensed production facility, we believe. Just a little bit more on that quality control process. It means that where number one is the licensed production testing that Health Canada mandates, Whedon, to protect its investment, applies a second tier of testing and does so through analytic testing, microbial tests, and a quality assurance team that they have, which kind of validates and holds accountable our own quality assurance team. Again, just maybe for consumption later, but it all begins their qualification process to qualify a licensed producer to be part of this network. Is the project itself, the facility, the team. They have to believe in us and validate that we're able to operate, and all of our SOPs, SOGs, right through until distribution and doing downstream protection through risk management. So again, that just ensures that sustainability, social responsibility is a big element which we pride ourselves on, and there's pay-for initiatives and charitable benefactors to a lot of the commercial arrangements which we make. Laboratory testing, consistent and variety of product. So again, that there's market share that's maintained, and now we have an international marketplace that's forming with the commoditization of the product, so we'll be focusing on some exportation as well to other permissible jurisdictions, and then of course being able to satisfy both medical markets, which is our primary focus. That's where our kind of skill sets lie, servicing highly injured patients, veterans of the Canadian Armed Forces, PTSD sufferers, chronic complex disease, and so on. So again, this is a little bit rehashing what Bruce said, but the MMPR, now the ACMPR, is probably internationally known as the leader of kind of setting the bar for commercially regulated and licensed production. It's a very prohibitive and strict regulatory process. Part of that's evidenced by the fact that we're 4 years into an application process and should be in the probably one of the first 100 licensed producers. There's about 80 right now, so we'll be one of the next few, hopefully. This is a little bit more on the economic development side, and right now what we can use as a use case and show some proof of concept. there are municipalities such as Smiths Falls and Leamington that have both had significant benefit and positive impact from licensed production in their communities. It's these use cases are brought to us. Specifically, Mr. Rafici, who's mentioned on here, is the CEO of Cannabis Ween, and his first industry experience was with starting Tweed, which is part of Canopy Growth Corporation, the largest licensed producer in Canada or in the world now. And they've, of course, reaped the benefits there locally. Good reviews from all the stakeholders that exist in that municipality, and of course, the job creation. I'll speak a little bit more about that shortly, of what we foresee the economic impact being. Other municipal kind of examples of municipal support, all ones I'm sure Bruce and maybe yourselves are familiar with. And then there's, of course, many more. And they've undertaken probably similar processes. And we've kind of used the successes and failures of our licensed producers, who many of we're partners with and work with in a variety of different capacities and consult for as well. So one of the advantages of being a little late stage in this game is that we can take and not make those same mistakes, but kind of use them and implement them and those processes and the technology that's developed thus far. For Chatham-Kent, it's two sides. We feel one is the community involvement, of course. Scott being from here, myself will become a permanent resident, as this will be our flagship project. So anything that we can do, of course, in terms of support and sponsorship, it's a big part of our culture, and so is the social responsibility. From an economic perspective, it's a net positive. I think we have local trades for every aspect of construction. There's ongoing upkeep and maintenance that will be using local firms as well. At our phase 1 and 2, depending full-time, part-time, could be minimum 25, and we can see it over 50, and that's full-time 25 full-time positions with another 25 that would be full-time and or part-time. Good wage rate and compensation, and of course any added economic boosts that we haven't validated in terms of numbers, and can't estimate taxes at this point, but we hope that the contribution will be significant. The same illustration, just rendering that Bruce put forth earlier. I don't think there'll be any fireworks going on every day, so that we'll build something that is, of course, appealing, that is well, what's the word, manicured and, sorry? Maintained and visually appealing. We were sensitive to that. We want to have pride and ownership of this. The landscaping, we're, again, well funded, so we're happy to, make sure that it's not an eyesore by any means, but something that, is as good as it could be. So the issues, again, that came as a result of our public consultation and information session. There was one that in some of the correspondence that circulated that we had visibility on indicated that there was a little bit of confusion, I think, between the medical and recreational markets. Of course, medical just is what we've existed with right now, and thus far, technically, recreational retail market will vary on a province-by-province basis. I think everyone's familiar that Chatham's been selected as a municipality where there will be an OCS, Ontario Cannabis Store. So that is the true retailer, and where there will be a transaction-based exchange between the regulator, in this case the province, which is the OCS, is really the Ontario's version of the LCBO, now selling recreational cannabis for the adult use market. Ourselves, we will be supplying a distribution channel, and right now that under medical, that's direct fulfillment to patient in e-commerce type of fashion, from licensed facility direct to patient in their homes, or through a clinician that's authorized to take possession. If we supply with any overage the recreational market, again, we have to supply a retailer. In that case, on a province-by-province basis, we'd be supplying the Ontario Cannabis Stores distribution network, and they would then distribute through their retail stores. There's 40 set for the first year of legal retail recreational cannabis market in Ontario. It's scaling to, I think it's 160. So that we will not have any transactions, or there won't be any sales of the facility. It's, of course, secured to a Health Canada security standard that is quite sophisticated, and control and access is, of course, monitored on a 24/7 basis with a lot of other redundancies built into that. I'll get Scott to give a little bit of a kind of color on the next 2 points here, I'll just give Scott a quick little boost because he deserves it. Has worked tirelessly from a technical perspective with his with familiarity of SOPs, SOGs from a structured workplace environment, has understood the technical aspects. So happy to have Scott speak on these 2 points here.
Thank you, David. On the light pollution point that we have up here next, there will be no light pollution from the indoor facility from the phase 1, of course. It's an indoor box, so there will be no light pollution. Light pollution, I know that Mr. Atkinson brought up, would be potentially on the greenhouse side. So with the greenhouse side, we would have supplemental lighting in our greenhouses for cloudy days or when the days are shorter in the wintertime. The supplemental lighting would run from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. for the flowering cycle. We also use blackout curtains. The reason why we do this is because we have to force the plants into their flowering state in the summertime, or else we'd have one crop. And our goal is to have 5 to 6 crops per year to make a good business model. The blackout curtains are used for the purpose of blacking out the exterior light from the sun, but also in the wintertime we use them to hold the light in too. So for that short period of maybe 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. where the sun's down in December and January, the curtains are sort of a double duty of actually keeping the light in. We can put a mylar reflective material on them, and they're used for 2 purposes. I know the point was brought up that not all producers do this, and that's their decision. This is a method that we would likely use if we went to a greenhouse style, because I do know some producers using it. It's very effective. So that's on the light pollution side. On the odor pollution, for the indoor facility, I can speak to Medical Marijuana Group in St. Thomas. It's a smaller facility. It's just under 10,000 square feet. We're about $500,000 just into our HVAC and mechanical system. We have had, and to speak to Mr. Atkinson about how many audits we've had from Health Canada, we had our initial audit in January. We passed it without any issues at all. They do look for odor when they pull up on site. The Health Canada auditors get out of their cars. They do a perimeter walk around the site and check for odor. We have no odor issues at all. Even when you enter into the facility, into our office area, there's no odor. When you enter into the production corridors, there's no odor. You don't even detect any odor until you enter the room. And the reason for that is the way we design the facility is under it's a negative pressure draw into the rooms. And the reason why we do that is to keep the odor in the rooms, and then it gets carbon filtered out of a stack, so there's no odor outside or inside. And the more successful facilities do it this way. There is some other ways other people do it, but this is the way that we've designed it, and we've had no odor issues at all at our St. Thomas facility. On the greenhouse side, again, the greenhouse is only potential. Some greenhouse producers do have odor issues. It depends on the mechanical design of the greenhouses. And without getting into a lot of details of the design that we would implement for our greenhouse, the one we would use is similar to one they use in Niagara Falls. CanTrust is a producer there. And the way they do it, they have very, very little odor outside, if any at all. And when I say very little, I mean possibly detectable right around the greenhouse, but if you step off the property, there's no way you'd ever detect it. And that goes back to Health Canada's enforcement of what they call Section 61 of the ACMPR. That speaks directly to odor mitigation. And if you are not in compliant of that, and they see multiple visits where you're not in compliant, they will shut your facility down. So when you do have your audits by Health Canada, they give you a rating. And this speaks to another point that Mr. Axon brought up, is how often, I think it was Mr. Axon or Councillor Foss, how often are we audited? So in St. Thomas, we've had a single audit right now. We're waiting for another audit to come back. We had an outstanding rating for a few very, very minor observances from Health Canada. They'll come back and they re-audit a few times. After they've audited you a handful of times, they give you a rating. And the higher your rating, the less they come back to audit. It makes sense, because if you're always in compliance, then they'd rather give their enforcement, their auditors, to the LPs that are not in compliance. So after you've been in compliance, then you have less visits from Health Canada, I guess is the best way to explain that.
I would like to finish the presentation. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. So on odor pollution, without getting into the details, very confident that using the methods that some of our producer friends have used, that we won't have any issues on the odor side. Speaking to odor also, I know Mr. Axley brought up about the destruction of waste material. So the destruction of waste material, as per Health Canada, being done in a few ways. One way is, like AFRIA does, you can spread it in the field outside. We would elect to not do that. At Medical Marijuana Group Corp., we use waste management, picks up our waste material. So simply what happens is your stalk, stem, and leaf, which doesn't really produce a lot of odor or aroma, it's mostly the buds anyways, it's destroyed by shredding it. You mix it 50% with kitty litter or soil, and then that weight is then mixed with another 50% of water. It's then considered denatured. There's very little smell at that point. But even still, it's put into large contractor bags, it's sealed, and put out with municipal waste. So they come pick up a large bin and they remove it that way. There is one other method that we could use also, and it's used. It's called a biodigester. So basically, it uses aerobic bacteria. You feed the biodigester the plant material, it eats it up, and then it creates waste that way. So two ways to dispose of waste. Both ways don't produce any odor, and I understand the concerns of spraying in the field. That is not our intention. We're not going to be spraying waste out the field behind the facility.
I'll just elaborate on the final point here, and this is in line with what Bruce had indicated, and we discussed as a result of our public consultation. The concern was that Health Canada, may not have the resources or the response time, therefore, to enforce if there is issues, which, again, well, our insurance is if somebody acquires a facility and there's new ownership at some point in the future, which, again, I'll say that won't happen on my watch, hopefully, then they will both be subject, ourselves and then we'll be subject to both the Health Canada enforcement process and layer, as well as the bylaw enforcement that will come with the site-specific, what's the terminology before? Zoning, okay. This just gives a little bit more detailed technical description of some of those odor mitigation methods. Again, ones which are in practice and in use. So we'll have access to the latest technologies, which are costly, but long term give us and the regulated assurance that we won't be having these conversations, or anyone will have to come and kind of press for any kind of resolution. And that's kind of, in summary, I think that covers everything that we wanted to articulate. So happy to answer questions at this point.
Councillor Kent, no? Councillor Solomon?
Thank you, Worship. We've got a lot of information here, but frankly, there's three levels. The Constitution of Canada provides 3 levels of government, and most of what we heard tonight is informative, but not really our jurisdiction. The federal government regulates the production of the production in the facility. The provincial government regulates at the retail level, and all we really do is deal with the land use planning. We're not the Senate. We're not the House of Commons. We're not Queen's Park. Our decision is simply, is this good land use planning? So, I mean, we could talk about this till the cats come home, but I don't know that there's anything that we should be doing beyond considering it from a land use planning perspective. What the House of Commons may do in the summer and what the Senate may recommend to them prior to that is not really our jurisdiction, and I hope we're not going to get beyond that. So I'd like to add one question, because it's probably the most relevant, I think, and then I'd like to bring a motion, if I can, to get us moving forward. And the question is, you're not the applicants.
Steve Jesus.
Are you?
Yes.
Well, neither. Curative Cannabis is not an applicant, unless I'm not understanding the application.
So for clarity, just Stephen is a landowner adjacent to us.
Yeah.
We've entered into a sale option agreement to purchase.
That's what I didn't see in here, so that's the answer to the question.
Okay.
Fine, thank you. Can I move the two recommendations?
Yep.
Well, guess I'll have to get these on. I move the recommendation of administration that council approve the zoning bylaw amendment application to rezone the subject lands and to a holding agricultural zone that would immediately allow for the marijuana for medical purposes production facility as permitted in agricultural A1 up to a maximum of 2,787 square meters in an enclosed building referred to as Phase 1 and allow for an additional 120,000 square foot for marijuana production referred to in Phase 2 once certain conditions to remove the holding zone have been met and adopt the implementing bylaw. And is there I guess there's two ways of spelling marijuana.
There's an H and a J. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that the Spanish who?
The government likes the H version.
Oh, that's what I was wondering. The government likes the H?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that figures. The federal government, no doubt.
It's Canadian spelling.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
It's
Probably
been-
the bilingual way.
It's been seconded by Councillor Robertson. Deal with further questions from council. Councillor Brock McGregor, please.
Just a quick question. Is your other facility, does it abut any residential areas, and have you had any odor complaints at that facility?
We haven't personally had any odor complaints. Not personally, no.
And a quick follow-up. Did you have any plans towards a Phase 3 that was sort of mentioned in some of the questioning? Is that something down the road you're looking at?
It's so downrange and downstream that ourselves and Wheaton hasn't. My personal opinion on it, it's this industry will commoditize, and cannabis will be manufacturing will be like canola oil or coffee or banana. So large-scale commercial producers that have been, and I'll use Africa as a great example, will have almost 3 million square feet under cultivation just domestically. There'll be an oversupply in about 24 months. So the likelihood of anything past the current, I'd say, it's slim. It's not impossible. The value in this sector will shift to the post-production processing of infusion and extraction into pharmaceutical formulations and recreational formulations as well. So if there's any added square footage, it'll probably be for those purposes, in my opinion. Thank you.
Further comments or questions? Councillor Verkunen, please.
Just a question I asked, I think, at the last meeting a couple of weeks ago. I was at a meeting with you fellas. I questioned, and I don't know if I ever got an answer or not. Do you have an MDS on that, like a minimum distance from residential property? Do you have that on? Has that already been set by the provincial government?
Bruce?
To your worship, no, there's no minimum distance. That strictly applies to livestock operations. There's no provincial formula, other than the setbacks that we've previously established in the zone. Sorry, Councillor Verkunen. There is no minimum distance separation formula established by the province for this.
Or something you said they haven't done it yet, or something. Did I hear that right?
There's no guidelines towards that. Potentially, the province could have some best practice or guidelines, but currently, what you're referring to just applies to the siting of livestock facilities.
Okay. Further comments, questions? Councillor Van Dam.
Through you, Mayor Hope, to David and Scott. I believe you've been in Chatham-Kent for about 4 years now, and I'm just wondering if your experience growing marijuana is 4 years as well. Is that correct?
No, I think it was about 6 to 8 months after that. We started initially and applied for R&D license under Health Canada pre-MMPR, and upon their adoption of the MMPR, that's when they suggested that as we're applicants or incumbent applicants to do any R&D under the auspices of the MMAR licensing, So I think it was about 6 months after the initial application that was filed. So I would say 3.5 years in around there would be a bit more accurate.
And through you, Mayor Hope, have you posted a profit yet since growing marijuana?
No, there's no. It's a loss. Everything is it's a loss in terms of the carrying costs and debt service on the property, and the MMAR is a under personal use production licensing. There's no retail or revenue operational side of that.
And through you, Mayor Hope, the marijuana business is in a rapidly changing environment. I'm sure you heard on Friday that Afria recently just purchased Nuvera.
Yep.
I'm just trying to get a sense of your long-term commitment to Chatham-Kent.
Absolutely. So we've kind of done our consolidation or acquisition by having Whedon and that team come in as a partner. From here, we, after 4 years of kind of Ubering the industry without having a license to hang our hat on, we've endeavored under the clinical banner and the medical management and consultation work, and of course the first much smaller facility. So this we see as our flagship project, for lack of a better word. So we'll retain our equity, and we'll retain care and control and operationalizing this. I'd say for quite a long time. So this was kind of the plan from the very beginning. But
seeing further comments? Just got a couple, and I respect Councillor Solomon when this is a planning meeting. But during the planning meetings, usually we identify situations that needs the, other orders of government. I won't call them upper, and nobody ever said they're upper, but orders of government need to identify some of the issues that we face locally planning these processes. And if we don't let our voice heard on behalf of our communities, like the resident who come forward, then we're not doing our job. So we need to make sure that we're echoing the voice and concern of residents, so it makes it easier for us to do the planning. I'm glad that we're going to have cohesive laws, so that way it's under a bylaw, because you always hate while you say, well, sorry, it's the provincial government or it's the federal government. Meanwhile, we're the government that gets it every day from the citizens if something's not right. So I think we need to have our voice heard. I guess the test is going to be, as you indicated, the flagship, and it'll be under the site plan.
Yep.
I mean, you still have to come back before the council with a site plan based on the costs. Hopefully you will be the good corporate citizen in neighborhoods, talk to the neighbors before you come see us, get a dialogue with them so that way they have a comfort level of what's going on. Chatham-Kent, I believe, has always been, you said 4 years ago you were in front of us when this whole thing came forward, and we opened our arms and welcomed it in the process, but at the same time, we're in a learning curve just as you are.
Absolutely, yep.
You went through joint ventures. So I'm just going to wish you well with tonight's vote, and also to look forward to the site plan coming back, because that'll be a condition of approvals, which will deal with some of those elements like the lighting, like the other things, which our site plan approval process will be able to determine. So,
absolutely. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate everyone's time this evening, and yourself, Your Worship. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Council.
So any further comments by council? And seeing none, I have a motion on the floor. Debate has been finished. I will ask council now to consider the recommendation now before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 13-3.
That concludes our portion on the planning. We're going to be moving into regular council now. Thomas. Thomas. Okay. Okay. I'm going to now move to the part of the regular council meeting, which begins with deputations as of 3 o'clock, and I'll turn to the clerk.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. We have 6 deputations this evening. We will begin with the deputations with regards to 14A, which is with regards to the Heritage Designation Bylaw 130-2012 on 90 Park Street, community of Chatham City. We will begin in order will be Patricia Pook, Susan Simpson, Dave Benson, John Taylor, Catherine Cowper. So please come forward, Patricia. I'll remind all speakers this evening they have a maximum of 5 minutes.
Which ones? To the clerk, before we begin presentations, it was an oversight on behalf of Councillor McGregor, Carmen McGregor, dealing with 14C, is declaring a conflict of interest with 14C. So just so Meredith and you both know, 14C is being declared by Councillor Carmen McGregor. Okay, sorry about that. Thank you very much.
Hook, I am here to support the designation of 90 Park Street. Like the owner of Haddington Villa, I own a designated building, a church. I bought the church because of the designation. Like the owner of Haddington Villa, it is incumbent on me to self-educate and know that I have a duty of care to preserve, protect, maintain, and enhance this property. Thanks to Council and the Chatham-Kent Heritage Advisory Committee to Council, this designation increases and enhances its value. Furthermore, I know that my heritage property holds a unique value to the community. This rural church is representative of a time when the community was built on the values we hold dear today. A belief in a higher power, a belief in a community, a belief in hard work, and a belief in hope in the future. These are fundamental values of good governance and the legacy upon which we build good citizens and good communities. Our beautiful historic properties continue to remind us that we are grounded in the past. Without these designated homes, schools, and churches, we lose the power of symbol that reminds us of the freedoms that we hold dear today, lest we forget. As you know, ownership is a commitment, especially when a designated property has been put through a rigorous review. The CK Heritage Committee, made up of educated volunteers, follows a strict process outlined by the Ministry of Heritage and Culture, based on historical, contextual, and architectural criteria. While you should be proud that there are 80 designated properties in Chatham-Kent, on the other hand, there are only 80 properties, designated properties, that passed this test. Don't make it 79. Designation is a duty of a responsible municipal council that understands the importance of symbol and history to a community, a legacy of incomparable value. The very term to designate means to preserve in perpetuity worthwhile properties for present and future generations' enjoyment and cultural identity. The term to de-designate means to destroy, break promise to preserve and protect, to abandon a symbol that links the past and continuity that links the past to the present. I applaud this council for supporting heritage goals. I felt a duty to raise this issue with the CRB that supported your original decision to maintain the designation. By the way, a designation brought forward by the owner. No doubt, to de-designate this property is to cast into question our belief in our heritage and its meaning in our lives. It casts into question the purpose of an advisory committee to council that works hard to educate, designate, and celebrate our history and its accomplishments. It calls into question individual property owners like myself who have faith in you and the value of designation. And finally, it calls into question motivation. Why de-designate? Because someone who has enjoyed the perks and privileges of a heritage property has a change of mind based on misinformation. A de-designation undermines the due diligence and good practice of all the above heritage and goals. The damage done here by de-designation is damage to the reputation and the integrity of this process, this council, and this community. Designation, on the other hand, is a positive affirmation of all we hold dear. I sincerely hope you will do the right thing and designate 90 Park Street a heritage property and a powerful symbol of who we were, who we are, and who we can be. Thank you.
Next speaker is Susan Simpson. On the same report, on deck is Dave Benson.
Your Worship and members of Council, my name is Susan Simpson, and I'm here to support the original designation of 90 Park Street. Ms. Campbell has stated that the heritage designation of her property, known as Haddington Villa, negatively impacts the sale of her property. She's indicated to Council that, as a result of input received from a local real estate agent, the property would be difficult to sell and or would sell at a discounted price as a result of its designation. This input from the realtor runs counter to academic research as well as the sales performance of the real estate market in Chatham-Kent. There are many variables that contribute to marketability, and those variables with the greatest influence include strength of the current market, location, price point, condition, and curb appeal. Heritage designation does factor into marketability, but in a positive way, as there is a distinct and generally robust market for designated properties. Designated properties generally perform well in the market, with 74% doing average or above average. These last two statements are taken from a comprehensive research paper by Professor Robert Shipley of the University of Waterloo, titled Heritage Designation and Property Values, Is There an Effect?, published in the International Journal of Heritage Studies. He investigated almost 3,000 properties in 24 communities across Ontario, and in what is believed to be the largest study of its kind undertaken in North America. It was found that heritage designation could not be shown to have a negative impact. The rate of sale among designated properties is as good or better than the ambient market trends, and the values of heritage properties tend to be resistant to downturns in the general market. In addition to not being supported by evidence, the input of the realtor and the concern of the owner are yet unfounded, as Haddington Villa has just been listed 1.5 years after Ms. Campbell's request to de-designate. When looking specifically at real estate sales during the past 15 years in Chatham-Kent and comparing the sales of heritage homes to non-heritage homes priced under $250,000, it's noted that the discrepancy between the listing price and the selling prices were identical for both groups. The heritage designation did not adversely impact the selling price of these homes, as Ms. Campbell had been informed it would. A Toronto-based real estate lawyer named Mark leader pointed out other market-enhancing aspects of a designated property in an article from the Toronto Star on February 10, 2012, titled "The Hidden Value in Heritage Properties." And these advantages to designating your home are as follows. You may have access to heritage grant programs to improve your property. Heritage staff can help with advice on renovations, and there may be rebates on property taxes. Wise Leader concludes that if you're selling your home, be sure to market the heritage designation as a positive feature. When reviewing the list of heritage homes that have been listed within the last 15 years in Chatham-Kent, I found that they all sold within 6 months, with the majority of these homes selling within an average of $7,000 of their asking price. Homes with a list price greater than $350,000, however, take longer to sell in both designated and non-designated samples. One large designated heritage home that did not sell through real estate but sold privately beyond the 6-month period was priced at more than $450,000, and I would contend that it was the price point and not the designation that contributed to a longer than 6-month period to sell. It's also possible that the reason that the house sold in 2016 and not 2017 and not 2016 was a change in the strength of the market, as 2017 benefited from out-of-town buyers representing 30% of the market. The heritage designation did not adversely impact the sale of this home, according to the buyer. He reports that it was the history of this home and its beautiful designated architectural features that contributed to his decision to purchase this important icon of Chatham-Kent history. Providing that the market remains as strong in 2018 as it was in 2017, Ms. Campbell will have success with selling her beautiful historic home, and we wish her all the best with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next speaker is Dave Benson. On deck will be John Taylor.
Mayor Hope, members of council, I wanted to share some thoughts about the report regarding the de-designation of 90 Park Street that you have before you tonight. I read an article in the paper today about this property and about the report, and the opening line was, "If you're considering getting heritage designation for your house, think about it twice." Well, I think it was a balanced article, but it failed to point out one major point, and that is that the property owner has been receiving a heritage property tax rebate for quite a few years. And that's a rebate that is given in acknowledgement that these properties are going to be protected for future generations and long into the future. And I don't know exactly what the taxes are on this place, but I think I think that the property tax rebate for residential property is about 25%, so it's probably $700 or $800 a year that comes back in a check from the municipality in February, and I think that that's great. I think it's an important program. In fairness, I receive a tax rebate as well because I have a heritage home. Even if I didn't receive one, though, I think it's an important program, and I would highly support it if it means that these properties are going to be protected for future generations. What bothers me, though, what I'm not too keen on, is the idea that you can designate a property and receive tax rebates that are subsidized by the taxpayers, you and me, and then de-designate or request your house to be de-designated when it seems like it might become an inconvenience to selling the house. That's not fulfilling the end of the bargain. And, of course, the other problem is that it sets a precedent. What are you going to do the next time somebody asks you to de-designate their property for the same reason? It's pretty hard not to be consistent, and that sets a whole chain of events into play. Property owners should think twice about designation. After designation, they become eligible for a 25% reduction in their taxes, and the only obligation that they have is to consult when they want to alter very specific features, usually on the exterior of their house. And the only body that can actually restrict an owner from altering or removing any of those designated features is you, council, not the Heritage Committee, not the Planning Department, it's you. And in the last 20 years since municipal amalgamation, you've only ever had one other case where a property owner has come to you with a dispute. And that was an extreme case where the property owner wanted to actually demolish the structure. In 20 years, 80 designated properties, and people don't seem to be unduly burdened by designation, and they receive their tax rebates. So it doesn't seem to be an onerous situation for the property owners. I'd like to read you something. In 1870, this home was known as Haddington Villa, and it is believed that it was built by Helen Witherspoon Charteris, who named it after Witherspoon ancestral home in Haddington, Scotland. This was the original home on an estate that once included the entire block, distinguished by the setback from Park Street and the 19th century iron fence. The rear gable roof retains the original slate, and inside nearly all original millwork and floors are intact. Now, that's not a description from the designation report. That's the description in the present ad, the real estate listing of the property. So obviously, those heritage features are considered an important selling point. And obviously, the house is being marketed to people that are going to value those heritage features. And those same people that are going to value those heritage features are going to value the fact that this house is recognized as an important community heritage asset and that it's designated. And any potential buyer of this house is going to value the tax rebate. So unless there's something I'm missing, I can't figure out any economic reason why a designated property would make the house less valuable or less easy to sell. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is John Taylor. On deck is Catherine Cowper.
Your Worship and Council, my name is John Taylor, and I'm one of the several people who are formally objecting to the de-designation of 90 Park Street, Chatham, known as Haddington Villa. I would like to share with you an overview of how we have arrived at this point. In June 2012, the property was designated as having cultural heritage value and interest under the Ontario Heritage Act. No notice of objection was received by Council from the owner prior to the passing of the bylaw. There have been no substantial changes to the property since that time. Neither the municipality nor the owner of the property have raised a contrary report that suggests that the property is not of historical value. In August of 2015, the owner requested that the designation be repealed. In October of 2015, Council considered and denied that request. The owner appealed the Council decision to the Provincial Conservation Review Board as her legal right in November of 2015. A report of the CRB was issued in January of 2017, recommending that the designation not be repealed. In March of 2017, Council considered the report of the CRB and heard submissions from the representatives of the owner. Despite the CRB recommendations, Council passed a motion to provide notice of its intention to repeal the designation. 4 persons raised objection to this notice. The CRB again heard evidence from all parties and has issued a second report, again recommending that the designation not be repealed. The owner has stated that disputed facts. The owner has stated that the designation of the property negatively impacts the sale prospects of her property. The objectors disagree that this point to studies and articles by academics and real estate experts which conclude that the designations have neutral or positive impacts on property sales. The objectors state that the designation was undertaken at the request of the owner. The owner has applied for and received municipal heritage property tax relief since the designation, indicating an awareness of the benefits of the designation. Reasons for objection. The designation of the property was done properly as outlined in Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. There were no objections raised at the time, and none of the historical, architectural, or contextual reasons for originally designating the property have changed. A report of the CRB has now twice recommended that the designation not be repealed. The request from the owner is based on unsupported information regarding financial impacts of designation. In addition to not being supported by evidence, the concern of the owner is speculative. This property has just recently been offered for sale. There's no indication at the present time that this property is an exception to the findings of research. The designation was undertaken at the owner's request The agreed facts confirm that no notice of objection was received by council prior to the passing of the bylaw. De-designation of a property for this reason sets a dangerous precedent. How will Chatham-Kent Council be able to turn down future requests for de-designation for the same cited reasons? Owners of heritage properties could have them designated, incurring no personal costs, take advantage of the municipal property tax relief, as the owner of 90 Park Street has done, and other programs that might become available to them. If they wish to sell, simply approach council, claiming independent financial hardship and citing this case. Council, to be consistent, would have to agree. This is not consistent with the intent of the Ontario Heritage Act, the Ontario Planning Act, or the Municipal Property Tax Relief Program. If you do this, what is the point of having a registry, of having designated properties, of having a heritage committee and planning staff devoted to the protection of our community's heritage resources?
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Catherine Cowper on 14A. On deck will be Mr. McNeil with regards to report 14B, the notice of motion of Councillor Wesley.
Mayor Hope and councillors, I just wondered before I start my prepared speech if I could just make a correction to some of the statements that have already been done.
Nope, that's all part of the 5 minutes, sorry.
So I can say that?
You can say it when you mix it in your prepared speech, but you can only get 5 minutes.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I don't have that much. Just to correct Mr. Taylor and Mr. Benson on their facts about my mother, Mrs. Campbell, collecting on the designation funds, the refunds for the taxes. She has not. She has not received any since for the last 4 years since she started the protest against the designation. So she has not collected a dime tax-wise. So I just wanted to make that clear as well, and that it is not for the sale of the house that she is wanting to take the heritage designation off, and that again is a false statement on their part. And I know that I've already last year at this point, you've read the letter, it's been part of your preparatory materials here today, so there are a lot of statements in there I'm not going to repeat here today because you have already heard all of that. So just to start on my prepared statement, it was a year ago that I stood here in front of you stating our family case for my mother Helen Campbell's property located at 90 Park Street. And my letter from last year has been included in your preparation documents for this meeting, so I'm not going to repeat all that. During this past year, throughout the appeal process, I have heard not one more compelling reason for you as council to change your position from last March 2017, where you did vote to repeal bylaw 130/2010. So why are we here again a year later arguing the same issue? As is allowed in our democratic system, citizens objected to council's vote. I would like to think that the objectors, David Benson, Patricia Pook, Susan Simpson, and John Taylor, would not have stepped forward if they had known the mental and physical toll this action has taken on my mother. She has not had a restful day or night throughout the years of this process. 1 year ago, after the decision by council to repeal, she was almost herself again. The family was relieved. Then the news of the repeal and countless hours of trying to explain the process, undergo the process, mitigate the unreasonable confrontations with city staff, the list goes on. A usually reasonable, respected citizen became so obsessed with this heritage issue that not a day went by that it was not discussed, fretted over to the limit of human endurance. Upon round two, the Ontario Heritage Committee presents to you the same arguments as in their previous proceedings, and I know you've all reviewed that document in your outline. They look at the brick and mortar and in no way consider the essential human side of this argument. Heritage value is not a trump card in making decisions, but only one of the many considerations to ponder. I would like to hope that the mental and physical health of your citizens is of utmost importance and vital in building a strong community of all ages. Please consider that Mom wants peace in her remaining days. Please be consistent and vote to repeal Bylaw 130-2010 for a second time to ensure the continued health of one of your greatest citizens. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
The final deputation this evening is Mr. Craig McNeil with regards to 14B.
He's just outside the door. This side, Ryan, on this side.
Your Worship, Councillors, thank you for having me here. My name is Craig McNeil. I live at 119 Water Street in Wallaceburg. I've been in town for a whopping 6 months, so it's pretty exciting being in front of you guys. Thank you again for your time. About 5 weeks ago, I started with the St. Clair River Conservation Authority with the idea of renaming the North Branch of the Sydenham River through Wallaceburg. Got in touch with Councillor Jeff Wesley and again with Carmen McGregor about this issue. There's been 2 people in the 5 weeks that I've been poking around at this issue that were upset by it. One thought I wanted to rename things in town, and the other one took offense at me being from Hamilton and wanting to name things in town. So I'll leave that with you guys. As you, Worship, has mentioned, it's not a higher level of government, but when I started poking around with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry about the naming board that they have, the frustrations got to me. I'm hoping you'll consider this, and if you do, one of the things that the province has done is they won't even consider naming anything after someone that's currently alive. Whereas I want to name after people that are alive, that are doing good things today within the community. It came from running into 2 people early on in my time in Wallaceburg that said, why'd you move to Wallaceburg? We're trying to leave. And I don't see that. Everything I've seen in Wallaceburg has been fantastic. I'm going to make this the place where I live the rest of my life. And I apologize to the councillors from the other parts of Chatham-Kent, but most of my knowledge right now is on Wallaceburg. Sorry, Councillor. I'm hoping that they do as well. So I only have 6 things that I would like you to consider if you go about doing this, and one of them I'd like to think it would be separate from this. I just mentioned to the fire chief, and the deputy chief is aware of this, that a firefighter died in 1940. My apologies. Died in the line of duty 2 days after Christmas, 1946 or 1948, and a plaque was erected for him. But in the building that it was erected is now, long story short, the plaque is missing. So I'm hoping that we can find that plaque and get it installed again in memory of the firefighter that lost his life in the line of duty. In the conversations with the fire chief, or the deputy fire chief, I'm sorry, I came to realize that the fire department doesn't own the building and that all those requests have to go through the chief administrative officer as well as with the police service. I'm hoping that you'll consider this. I hope that you'll look at the rules that the province has made, but I hope you'll tweak them to the Chatham-Kent way of doing things and actually getting them done. The red tape at the province is just baffling to me. In the 60 or 70 people that I've talked to about this, just in Wallaceburg, again, my apologies, one of the comments was that there has to be a ceremony to this. It can't just be putting a plaque up that maybe someone will drive by on a bridge, but they would like to see a ceremony in place in the field, family invited, and whatever else you may consider in that. I was in the library in Wallaceburg for 2 hours, and one of the things I mentioned in there, and they agreed with it, is all the awards that council gives out, not just this naming thing, be put into permanent books and located in the libraries, and perhaps even the libraries in the school, and one in City Hall where people can come in and read the history of the people that received those awards. I hope you'll consider that if it's all possible. I'm hoping that you'll actually talk to staff about following up the rule that the province has about not entertaining anything that of someone that stole. Pardon me, don't do this often. The rule that the province has about not considering naming anything after someone that is still with us. I'm hoping that staff can follow up if we do name something at the city level, follow up after these people have passed and actually get it approved and that be officially done by the province. Another comment that came from a friend of Councillor Wesley's, and I guess he'll talk about it as well, was to go to great lengths to make sure that we don't duplicate things. This person works for 911 and there's still, I think he said, over 500 issues of duplication within Chatham-Kent that just confuses the matter. Do the research, do it properly, do it once. Name things one time after someone or family that is notable, and hopefully that will inspire people to like this town the way I like it. So, again, 44 seconds short. Thank you so much for your time and your patience.
Thank you. We'll move to the next item on the agenda, deals with the consent agenda. So moved by Councillor Solomon, seconded by Councillor Vercouteren. Any items of interest? Councillor Van Dam.
Mayor Hope, just item 10A1.
Councillor Robertson, same one. Further? Actually, I had the same one too. So, seeing no further, all those in favor? Opposed, if any, and it's carried. Councillor Van Dam.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. My question refers to page 3 on the document before us. And I was just wondering, through you to planning, how successful we are, or are we moving any closer towards getting a response from Natural Resources Canada on the cost sharing for the Lake Erie Integrated Shoreline Management Plan, and also wondering if perhaps we should be including the Thames River in that as well, with the recent flood episode in Chatham-Kent in February 2018.
Before you respond, I think in respect to the question, I asked the earlier question of administration. I think they have a presentation which they wish to do first, which may answer, may not answer, but it'll allow us to have a more wholesome part of that.
Fair enough. I can go for that.
Okay. Administration, please.
Your Worship, I just want to say that we just briefly want to comment on this report coming to tonight. It was just over 3 years ago that planning services came under my responsibility in the corporation. My first task was to hire a director of planning, and Bruce has just completed 3 years last week. I think that's been a successful hiring. And at that time, we also proposed to bring development review applications in-house. And you approved that in the summer of 2015. We had a transition year, and our first full year actually doing development applications entirely in-house was in 2017. And so we promised to come back, and very briefly, Bruce is going to comment on the results of this transition.
Thank you, Your Worship. So as John mentioned, I'll be really brief and just hit the high points here. No way I took too long earlier in my planning session, but and I will, to Councillor Van Dam's question, I'll hit that one on the second slide in terms of the NRCan proposal. So in terms of just the development review services, John mentioned, it was completely internalized in 2016. The planning services always had a component of development review. And I think that's important, and I didn't even really appreciate the amount of work that goes into the back end of the process. Like once council approves something, there's a lot of work in terms of agreements and process administration that happens after the fact. So I think you just point that out to recognize that piece of the puzzle as well. So just briefly in terms of just looking at total planning application files by year. So last year we did 200 individual applications. As you know, we'll combine them where there's some synergy in terms of process and bringing them before council. So that translates to, there's 168 of those files last year. Over the past 4 years, almost, I don't know, a bit iron, it's been almost 140 applications on the button per year of total files over the last few years. So there's an increase of almost 30 files last year. And what struck me as being interesting, and I think that's apparent just in terms of the development that's happened in the community over the past year, is that if you can just look at the number of site plans and site plan amendments in 2017, we did 35 of those last year. Some of those larger ones come before council, over $2 million. Many others are under that are approved administratively. But that's almost equals the total of the previous 4 years combined in terms of site plans. And site plans are a good indication of actual growth and development. What's interesting is surplus dwellings, for instance, went down quite a bit over the past year. But we also had some plan of subdivisions. There's a couple others that will be coming to council shortly, along with a couple other major site plan applications in the near future as well. So development review is one piece. Certainly the other piece of our core responsibility is long-range planning, and that's obviously policy, official plan being the number one. So 2015 was the last time the official plan was updated. So in a next year or two, we're going to have to start doing some of that background work in terms of the next piece of official plan policy updates. Over the last year, it's not like we haven't been doing anything on the policy side. Certainly brought forward the housing and rooming rental bylaw, the zoning bylaw update. We're managing source water protection agreements with the Upper Thames Region Conservation Authority. We're involved in the CK development standards, which is wrapping up here fairly shortly and before council. And then we did help out with that proposal that Councillor Van Dam noted, the NRCan proposal. And just a quick comment on that. I can tell council I've heard from the lead consultant on that, and happy to say that NRCan has agreed to fund that proposal, as we are one of many partners on that. It's not just Chatham-Kent. We're one case study in this larger proposal. They're still working through the necessary agreements. I'll hear from them soon, I'm sure, but work will start on that shortly. Our piece, that case study on that proposal, was specific to Lake Erie Shoreline Management Plan, so that is the piece of that puzzle. So I hope to hear more on that shortly. Now, I must acknowledge over the past couple of years, and even with the volume of applications, our heavy focus has been on development review. But we will need to focus once again on having more long-range planning in the next few years, just based on recent provincial legislative changes and the need that we're required to do a 5-year update on our official plan. And I can tell you one of the main things in provincial focus-wise is on including climate change adaptation and mitigation policies in local land use planning, including in the official plan. There was a recent legislative amendment. Actually, it will be proclaimed as of next week. That's in the same bill. Council will have a report on this in the near future. In terms of the OM, the Ontario Municipal Board, has now been completely revamped. It's called the Local Appeal Review Tribunal. The board isn't going away. They've renamed it, and they've kind of changed the focus. It's more heavily based on local decision-making, but at the same time, it's still a mechanism for people where there's land use disputes, and we'll have an updated appeal on that. In the last piece, just, there's some comments on when we came before council back in 2015 on this. Let's hit this highly. So in terms of the base budget, so back 2015 we noted that the base budget was around $750,000, 2014, 2015. And we noted that the base would be first year savings of about 177. Our base budget right now is actually, the base was 529 in 2016 and 187 or 548 in 2017. It was $206,000 and 187. So we've kept the base budget to what we projected and see that as being sustainable over the next several years based on the current model. I did want to quickly point out, because I think that's an important point too, is if development does continue to increase at the clip we've been experiencing, the need to do further policy work as the province sees fit. So Chatham-Kent, actually, when you look back at the BMA study, I'm looking at the 2017 one, and this has been pretty consistent over several years. So this is a look at single-tier municipalities. So this is simply saying that we currently, the cost for planning as a core function in Chatham-Kent is currently $6 per net capita. So if we often, I took a lot of these comparators out, the larger centers, because it didn't make a lot of sense, but when we often compare ourselves to the Kingstons and Sudburys and Peterboroughs, similar makeup, geography, population, etc. So they're spending anywhere between 25 to 30, and the average of municipalities are spending about 18 per capita, just to point this out. A lot of them are heavily focused on long-range planning. I can suggest to you we're trying our best to keep up with the legislative requirements, but to truly look at long-range planning to get to that point. These municipalities are spending on that function. A lot of it's on environmental initiatives as well, environmental planning initiatives. So I'll leave it at that. If there's any further questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Just bring lights back up. I wanted to make sure, just so Council knew, this was an important debate that we had about bringing the services back in-house, and I really thought this was important information. You just can't file in a consent agenda. It's something we need to talk about because we get criticized at times, but I think, it's important to understand that we made a good decision. We're putting out more, and we're getting a lot of applications through the process. I think the information that is being shared with you is something I believe we did a right decision when we brought the service back in-house. Councillor Van Dam, I apologize for moving in on you the way I did, but I wanted the presentation. Is there further questions you have with the resource stuff? No. Okay. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. I like yourself, I applaud Bruce and congratulations, Bruce, on 3 years with the municipality. But like yourself, I'm pleased that we have a report that's demonstrating the progress of our actuals compared to where our projections were when we were walking through the decision-making process. So on page 9 of the report, we highlight that the annual savings were expected to be approximately $178,000 in year 1, $164,000 in year 2, and with a sustainable savings of $141,000. So we've saved about $50,000 more than that figure over the course of this term. And so I have two questions. A, what do we attribute the positive variance to relative to our initial projections? And if the initial sustainable annual savings projection was expected to be $141,000, do we now expect that figure to be something greater than $141,000 based upon this most recent performance?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple comments on that. So it took a while to get hired up, frankly, in terms of what I presented to you a couple of years ago. And we're currently not, right now we have 3 planning technicians or junior planners, where I originally said we'd have 2 of those and 2 planners. So there's some salary savings there right now. Some things we'll have to reconsider here going forward in terms of our staff complement. The second is we budget every year in terms of development applications. Like in our budget, there's an offset. It's a bit of a guess. We're looking at the trends. So we had more applications, i.e. more fees. That would increase that surplus. So last year, this is base budget saving, there was a surplus of about $90,000 on that base. But going forward, I think it's safe to say it would probably, depending on development, it'll fluctuate a little bit in terms of those savings. Okay.
Further comments? And seeing none, a motion to receive for information. So moved by Councillor Robertson, seconded by Councillor Fluker. All those in favor? Opposed? If any, and it's carried. Next item on the agenda deals with notice of motions. Councillor Vercouteren, please.
Yes, Your Worship. Notice of motion. I, Councillor Vercouteren, hereby provide notice of motion to Chatham-Kent Council. Whereas our local OPP assist our local municipality police and our established a valuable corporation citizen throughout the local phone, police and investigation service, including traffic, collision, and equipment. Whereas OPP Municipal Police Bureau is offering a free, no-cost presentation to Chatham-Kent Council and to the citizen and taxpayer of Chatham-Kent. Whereas part from having a local OPP professional station unit in Chatham-Kent, and many OPP civilians and sworn officers live and pay taxes in Chatham-Kent. Whereas Chatham-Kent Council, our administrative staff, and taxpayers would learn a great deal with the deal of a no-cost OPP presentation. Whereas no municipal department or municipal function should immunize scrutiny, whether in cost of operation, review, or others. And whereas Council's obligation to obtain full and complete information for any department that by doing so would be the best benefit to the residents and taxpayers. Therefore, Council hereby instruct and agree to direct administration to contact OPP Sergeant Peter Marshall at the earliest scheduled Council meeting to request a free, no-cost OPP police presentation to Council for the taxpayers and the citizen of Chatham-Kent. I hear so move.
Further notice of motions, Councillor Fluker.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mine's a bit shorter. It's regarding event fees. I, Councillor Brian Fluker, hereby provide notice that I will bring forward the following motion at the April 16th council meeting, not the next council meeting, the April 16th council meeting, for discussion and voting. That all veterans groups be removed from any fee charge, and these added charges be removed from any service club paying rental or other fees.
Further notice of motions. And seeing none, our next item on the agenda deals with tender awards. Let's deal with the first item.
Item 12A, contract T18-162, bridge rehabilitation, the Mule Street over Cornwall Creek Drain, community of Thamesville.
Councillor Pincinel, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the recommendations as presented.
It's been seconded by Councillor Van Dam. Any comments or questions from Council? Councillor Van Dam.
Through you, Mayor Hope, to members of the PUC who are here this evening. I understand that the bridge is going to be closed for a few months with this, and just wondering how the water main replacement is going to affect the residents of Thamesville when they do that replacement at the same time.
Adam.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. So I just confirmed with the PUC that I would answer this. Basically, the way it'll work is just like we do any other water main replacement, we would construct the main and then test it and then do the crossover. So there'd be a short disruption, just like every other water main replacement that we do, but it wouldn't be an extended period of time.
Short, through you, Mayor Hope, by a few hours or a few days?
Thank you, Mayor Hope. The goal would certainly be a few hours, but you know, once you get in the ground, things go most of the time, but obviously, yeah.
Just happen to know a few people who live on Lemuel Street.
Gotcha.
Further comments, questions? And seeing none, ask Council now to consider the recommendation before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 15-0.
Let's deal with the next item.
Item 12B, tender award contract T18-164, Erio Road Rehabilitation, community of Harwich.
Councillor Verkutteren, please.
Your Worship, I'll move the number 1 and 2 on the application.
Seconder, that's Councillor Thompson. Comments, questions? Councillor Van Dam.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. Don't know if this is the first time that we have used the GeoNet MacNet, but I was just wondering if I could get a few comments or a better understanding of how that whole technology is going to be used this time around. Mr. T-Bear.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. So the GeoNet MacNet is a subgrade and sub-base soil reinforcement application, which is like a woven geotextile grid layer that gets applied between the soil and the granular base layers. It helps increase the bearing capacity and life of the road while reducing the thickness of granular and allowing the road to act as a more uniform structure. So we've consulted with our geotech engineer. They also recommend the use of this product, and our specify identifies this product or an approved equal, all in accordance with all the required regulations and standards. So this will be the first for Chatham-Kent utilizing this product. But other municipalities that we consulted with would be Lambton and Essex County. They have used it, and it has proven successful.
So it caught my eye, I believe, because it was mentioned at Good Roads. The only thing I don't understand is this rolled out, or how's it put into place exactly?
So when they thank you, Mayor Hope. So when they excavate the granular subbase and they expose the soil surface of the road, which is going to be approximately 600 to 700 millimeters down, they're going to roll out this application, and there's a overlap of the material from one lane over to the other, about a meter overlap, and then that overlap and having it rolled out and then wrapped along the sides of the road of the subsoil acts as that uniform base stabilization. So it is a rolled out type of application.
So it's a watch and see.
Yes.
Further comments? Councillor Thompson, followed by Councillor Carmen McGregor.
Thanks. I'm not sure who I would direct this to, but could you run through the plans as far as how we're going to mitigate traffic concerns on Erie Shore Drive?
Thank you, Mayor Hope. So as identified through our Public Information Center, we did identify that if there is any, during the course of operation and construction, we are planning to close a section of Erie Road between Internal Line and Erie Shore Drive. As a result of that closure, we are going to be utilizing Erie Shore Drive as a detour route. So in the event of an emergency on Erie Shore Drive, we have it written and built into the contract that all, if there's ever an emergency that happens, that we will communicate that directly at any time during the day to the contractor, and they are to respond immediately and reopen Erie Road to accommodate for that detour, or to accommodate for that emergency.
Okay, how about just general traffic concerns in regards to speed limits and volumes?
So the concerns that came in through the PIC, obviously regarding the volume of traffic, we have no concern with the road's structure and stabilization or stability of the road itself. And of course, any speeding concerns, we'll make sure that it's brought to the attention of enforcement to monitor, and we'll be keeping an eye on that.
Okay. The only thing I would like to add then is we did do a culvert recently on Erie Road, just a culvert replacement. I think it was closed for 4 or 5 days, and some of the residents on Erie Shore Drive were already concerned about the traffic increase that they saw just in that time frame. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention, that this is something that there's going to be a lot of eyes on when we do that work.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Councillor Carmen McGregor, please.
That was my question.
Okay. Seeing no further comments? Oh, Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Your Worship. When are you planning to do the work? That's, I think, what the public really wants to know.
Of course. Thank you, Mayor Hope. So as identified in the contract, construction is scheduled to begin the beginning of May and is scheduled for completion by mid-June.
Okay.
It is a very aggressive timeline.
Well, no, if you did it in the fall, it would be at a time when there's less traffic. But
We decided to move forward essentially with the spring timeline because that was, as reported through us through our drainage group and through our through discussion with a lot of our senior management, is that was a time of low tide and best to proceed with utilizing Erie Shore Drive as the detour route.
yeah, well, I understand that part, but that's also the time of heavy traffic from May to 4 weekend on into the summertime period. So if you've got a problem and a worry about Erie Shore Drive seeing increased traffic, that's the reason they're going to see more, as opposed to the fall when there's not so much traffic in that area. But anyway, if that's what you're planning, I'm not sure that, from my perspective, it will affect the public more. It may well be a good engineering idea to do it that way, or a good drainage idea, but that's when the problems are going to be created from the traffic increase. Okay, did you have something else you wanted to comment on?
Just further to comment on that, this was obviously brought up, this timeline at the PIC,
yep.
With all members, and it was a very well-attended PIC as well.
Sure was.
And no concerns arose with that construction timeline.
Well, good. So we won't be hearing from anybody complaining during that period of time on Erie Shore Road or in Erie itself.
Further comments?
Hope springs eternal.
And seeing none, ask Council now to consider the recommendation now before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Let's deal with the next item.
Item 12C, tender award contract T18-105C, cold in place recycling with expanded asphalt material.
Councillor Fluker.
Very pleased to move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Seconded by Councillor Oche. Comments, questions? Councillor Van Dam.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. To you, or through you, to Engineering Services. I know in 2016, we as a council had made the decision to use Fugro software to do a very comprehensive drive over all of the roads in this municipality to really assess, the roughness and the surface distress indications of all of them. But I've yet to see a report that focuses exclusively on that decision, because in this report, we still rely on your analysis of road analytics software. And so that concerned me a little bit. And so my question to you, Mr. T-Bear, why did that happen, and when are we going to get to see the result from that decision?
Thank you, Mayor Hope. So planning for our 2018 Golden Place program occurred essentially a few years back, again through our old road analytics software, where Electric Line and Wheatley Road were identified as potential candidates that needed to be confirmed through our geotech investigation that occurred last year. So that was confirmed that we did have sufficient asphalt essentially to move forward with CIP for Wheatley Road and for Electric Line. So engineering currently has our new 5-year plan through FUGRO, which is being reviewed and finalized for council reporting in the very near future. Our plan is to transition to this new program this year, but still commit to the road sections that we have identified in this report for Golden Place.
Through you, Mayor Hope, because you know and I know that wasn't a cheap endeavor. That was $330,000 plus HST. And that was only good for 3 years. So I'm starting to get a little bit of pause for concern on the return of investment with that, because we'll have to do it again in 2 years. So good that we're doing it. I mean, we don't do a lot of cold in place, and this is a very long stretch. I'm pleased to see we're using the technology with the MacNet, GeoNet, and cold in place. I mean, I believe that these are very good mediums to go when we want to improve asphalt. I compliment you on that, but I still can't help but wonder, if we pulled the trigger too fast on FUGRO. But good job.
Further comments? Seeing none, I would ask council now to consider the recommendation before you. To the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Next item.
Item 12D, Contract T17-109, Bridge Rehabilitation over Pond Road over East Otter Creek, community of Chatham Township.
Councillor Foss.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move recommendations 1 and 2.
Seconded by Councillor Leclerc. Comments or questions? And seeing none, I'd ask council now to consider the recommendation before you. To the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Let's deal with the next item.
Item 12E, Sole Source, Striker Power Load EMS.
Councillor Robertson, please.
I'll move the recommendation.
Seconded by Councillor Fluker. Comments, questions? And seeing none, I ask you to consider the recommendation now before you. To the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Let's deal with the next item.
Item 12F, Sole Source, Chatham Emergency Medical Services Station, Exhaust Ventilation Replacement.
Just want council to know there's been a change. Oh, yes, please.
Council, just to let you know, the report that is in your sent out copy said that the funds would come from the building life cycle budget. You'll note on the screen number 2, it's now been changed to come from the ambulance station's life cycle budget instead. Thank you.
Councillor Brock-McGregor, please.
I'll move the recommendations.
Been moved by Councillor Brock-McGregor, seconded by Councillor Foss. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, I would ask you now to consider the recommendation now before you. Now turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Our next item on the agenda deals with Public Utilities Commission. First item.
Item 13A, 2017 Summary Reports for Drinking Water and Wastewater Systems.
Councillor Fluker, please. This has been seconded by Councillor Thompson. Comments or questions? And seeing none, I ask you now to consider the report, or the recommendation, sorry. I'll turn to the clerk.
Councillor Robertson. Thank you. All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Our next item on the agenda deals with community development. First item.
Item 14A, Heritage Designation Bylaw 130-2012, 90 Park Street, Community of Chatham.
Councillor Van Dam, please.
Pleased to move.
Pleased to move this.
Pleased to move the item number 1 that everyone has before them.
Okay. Seconder, Councillor Robertson. Comments or questions? Councillor Wesley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just want to clarify that the motion is that we would not be repealing the bylaw. Just so I'm clear. Okay. Well, and the reason why I'm asking is because I'm actually in favor of repealing the bylaw, and just would say to council that if council so chooses and this is defeated, I would be more than happy to put that one forward. And I'd just like to say a few comments. And, you know, we have a great group of passionate volunteers here dealing with heritage issues. And while this situation is a little bit different because they were designated and now they want to be de-designated, I really think from a heritage point of view, we should be working with the community. We should be working with willing participants. We should be working with willing private property owners. I don't see us doing that. I see members of the Heritage Committee that are initiating appeals and legal challenges, and that's their right. But I think we need to get back to the point of view when we're looking at heritage properties that we're looking at willing participants, willing private property owners. Because at the end of the day, the one test I applied to this, and I thought about all the things, and I thought, the thing that kept coming back to my mind was, okay, whose property is it? I know whose property it is, but whose property is it? And where are we in a place in our society where we're going to dictate to people who have bought houses, taken out mortgages, did repairs, lived their life there, and now want to do something, and we're telling them what they can or cannot do. And one thing I wanted to stress is that I heard back and forth about you can argue whether a heritage designation negatively impacts the sale of a property. Someone who's interested in heritage properties would probably pay more or be interested in a house like that. Others not so. I can tell you my personal opinion. This isn't scientific. This is one person. My personal opinion is that I agree that it does hurt the value because with what I've seen happen in Chatham-Kent and the restrictions and the things that we put on, I sure as heck wouldn't buy a house with a designation on it. I wouldn't. And I just think when we keep going forward and we keep looking at not dealing with willing participants and willing private property owners, I think in the end it's being a disservice to the cause. Because looking from the outside in, I wouldn't advise anybody to get a designation, and I wouldn't advise anybody in my family to buy a house with a designation because of the issue surrounding it. I understand the passionate volunteers. I understand that they're doing what they feel is the right thing to do. I get all of that. But at the end of the day, I still come down to the point of view that whose property is it? And that's the side that I'm going to side on. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
I did have one question to staff. If we decided to, I guess, not go this route, is there any limit to somebody getting the property redesignated?
Thank you, Mayor Hope. If this property or any other property was not designated, this council would entertain any request for heritage designation with a recommendation at the advice of its Heritage Committee.
Right, so being designated and then de-designated would not preclude a property from being redesignated?
It would not, no.
No. And then at that point, most of the work would already be done if we had a property designated, de-designated, and somebody wanted to redo it, so it wouldn't potentially take near as long as it took the first time around?
No, it would not.
Okay. I would echo Councillor Wesley's comments. I'm kind of concerned about the precedent this is setting. It's not a designation to enter into lightly. I think a lot of people understand that, and I think a lot of people respect that. But when I look at it, I would buy a house with a designation. At least I thought I would up until today, and now I would seriously reconsider it because from the looks of it, it's one of those things you can't seem to undo, or at least you can't undo it easily. To me, looking at this, it's kind of a case of buyer's remorse, really. The individual wanted it designated. It took about from 2010 to 2012 to do it. And then she had it for a few years and said, you know what, maybe this isn't working out for me. I want to change it. And she's been fighting that battle for almost as long as the house was designated. I'm uncomfortable with telling people what they should and shouldn't do with their homes, their properties, and that's what this is. It's her house, and at the end of the day, she should get to decide what she wants to do with it. I can't support this. I like heritage properties. I own one. It's not designated. I don't think I'm going to be designating it because it can't be undone, or at least not easily.
Councillor Pinto.
Thank you, Worship. I echo the comments that the Heritage Committee, they are passionate. I don't think we should be speaking so harshly against heritage properties because there are a group of people who love that. I have an issue with this motion that's on the floor, and it gets back to the old property owners versus what the rest of the community believes is important. And not saying it's not important. I don't honestly believe, going through this a year ago, that the lady really realized, the obligations that she was going to have with a designated property. And when she did come to that point, she, realized this isn't for her. And I think this has been a real challenge for her, maybe even a nightmare. We always ask when somebody's coming to designate a property whether the homeowner is in favor or not. And there's a reason for that. Simply because we shouldn't be dictating what people can and can't do with their property. Now, I know to a degree we do through our bylaws, but this is one of those things that I just fundamentally I have a problem with, and I won't be supporting the motion up there, and I look forward to Councillor Wesley bringing another one. Thank you.
Councillor Vercouteren, you had a comment?
I just have a question. Whoever's at the mic here, just want to know if this has happened before. Is this the first time it's ever happened, or?
Thank you, Mayor Hope. I'd just like to ask a question of clarification, if I could. If the question is, has anyone requested a designation bylaw be repealed? Okay, thank you. I think this was mentioned perhaps in one of the deputations, and it's in my research as well. In the last 20 years, only the owners or the group of trustees of the Erie Street United Church in Ridgetown requested that property be de-designated in order to demolish it. And that situation is different than this situation. There were very severe structural issues with that building, and they were forced to go through that process.
Okay, well, Your Worship, I won't be supporting it because I have experienced this in the last 44 years of my real estate business. It happened a few times where somebody questioned it and found out their insurance policy was just about made up for the profit they got back because it was more money to redo a historical home. And so I won't be supporting it because I think it's going to devalue the property a bit. To some people. Some people would like it, I'm sure, but I have to look at this. This is the wish of the owner, so I'm not supporting the motion.
Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. I am going to support the motion. I second the motion. I believe it's the right thing to do. We dictate, I hear a lot about we shouldn't tell people what to do with their property, and for the most part, we should be respectful of property rights. However, there are rules that govern our day-to-day operations and how we dictate to private property owners. For example, through the building code. The fire code tells property owners what they can and can't do with their property. This council has dictated the ability to use storage containers on your property and where you have to place them. There's zoning issues, land use, multiple residents land use in zoning. So it happens all the time. So I think we need to understand that there are rules that govern property. Additionally, and I need to ask this question through the chair to I think to planning, but probably to Ryan. But was the participant was the property owner a willing participant at the onset?
Thank you, Mayor Hope. Yes, the property owner did request designation in 2010.
And in the language that goes with the designation, is it highlighted that the purpose of the designation is to designate the property in perpetuity? That was my understanding.
Yes, that is the intent of the legislation. We're going back several years, and there's a lot of misinformation about heritage designations in general. The municipality does publish a lot of factual information about heritage on its website. That issue, as it relates to this property and its property owner, has been debated at council, at the Conservation Review Board, and I'm not in a position to speak accurately about what was and wasn't conveyed.
That's fair, but if myself, my family were going to designate a property, we'd be sure to understand what the ties are attached to said designation. I'm struggling as well. Certainly, I've appreciated at this table that a number of councillors have said that their personal opinion is that it may reduce the value of the property. There's no scientific evidence of that whatsoever, so I have a personal opinion that it won't. It won't reduce the value of the property. So I disagree with that sentiment, and we don't have any. There's no consensus on that front. I support it. It's the right thing to do. It's consistent with the legislation. It's consistent with the intent of the original designation.
Councillor Carmen McGregor, please.
I'm just curious. I know if this motion fails, Councillor Wesley was talking about bringing another motion. Do we actually need another motion? Because wasn't our motion last year to de-designate? So would this not fall back to our original motion a year ago?
I'll need a motion.
You will? Okay. Thank you. I
need a motion.
Yep. Thank you.
Councillor Brock McGregor, please.
Yeah, another question through you to Ryan, I believe. I've been here for 3+ years, and I don't think I've seen a designation where we had an unwilling homeowner. So where the committee has gone out, picked a property, said we need to designate it, and we do that against the wishes of a homeowner. So in my experience, it's always been the homeowner's been part of the process in instigating that designation. Is that sort of a fair sentiment on the program?
Thank you, Mayor Hope. I would agree with that statement. It is a fair statement. There's an exception I'd just like to take a moment to clarify. Working with the Heritage Committee for all the years that I have, and certainly some of the members have been on the committee for longer than I've worked for Chatham-Kent. Chatham-Kent Council has had a long-standing position not to consider a designation bylaw without owner support, and that has been understood by the committee and by staff, and we adhere to that. Where there is a difference, where council has sometimes seen a request for designation come forward, is where there's a property listed on the Municipal Heritage Register. These properties are listed as they're believed to have some heritage value or interest in our community, but they're not designated and they don't have certain restrictions placed on them. Other than that, they must wait 60 days to receive a demolition permit. In those two cases, in this term of council, with what were referred to as the Sickle Steel Newkirk property on Longwoods Road, as well as what was referred to as the Eatonville Hotel out in Howard Township, council was obligated to decide on that demolition permit because those buildings were listed. Therefore, the Heritage Committee did bring a designation bylaw forward for council's consideration under that circumstance. Both times those properties were removed from the register to allow the owners to follow through with their plans.
Thank you. And I think that's important to remember in this process, that these are brought forward by the homeowner initially with the intention that it's going to be a long-term designation, and that in these exceptional circumstances where a demolition is needed in a derelict building, we've permitted that. So I think that there's a lot of misinformation out about this program. No one's going to come and designate a home that that hasn't been designated in the past without the owner's consent. So it's important to remember that this process has started from owners wanting the designation.
Further comments? Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. I have a designated home, and I was approached by somebody years ago, and I voluntarily, went through the process, and it was great. And just to be clear on the whole heritage designation thing, if there's anybody out there that thinks they have a heritage home, sometimes we speak as though it's a burden on a home, and it's not, because effectively what happens is something in your home is designated heritage. In my case, it's the keystoning above windows, so it's masonry. So I'm not able to change that without permission, I suppose. But my question was, can I paint them pink and put jewels on them? And they said, you can do whatever you like as far as that. So the restrictions are very low. It's not a burden at all to have a heritage home. It's kind of a neat thing. They do a great deal of research, give you a big history on your home that you'd otherwise probably never ever discover. And of course, there's that tax refund, which is great. You get a nice plaque for the outside. But just so that people are clear, it's not a burden at all. I've never felt it has been. It won't affect me selling my home at all. It will affect me if I want to tear it down. It's been standing there for 168 years, so it's unlikely it's going to get torn down in my lifetime. And again, if that was the case and it was necessary for safety reasons, I'm sure this council would approve the demolition. But just to be clear, it's not a burden at all. So when we say, well, that designation is going to have this effect and this effect, there's almost no effect. They could have designated my staircase, the keystone, and they said, what would you like to do? And I said, well, maybe the part that would be less likely to be changed. And they agreed with that, and the process went through, and I'm very happy with it, and I think it's a great thing, and it's not a burden at all. Thank you.
Further comments? Councillor Kenneth, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be supporting this. I guess when I look at it, we've got 80 different properties here that have designations. I certainly wouldn't be supporting this if the owner originally had come into this and was fighting against it. What I don't want to see is all these properties say, when an owner gets in and says, I think for whatever reason I want to de-designate this. When you're looking at it, if you own it, you understand that it is a designated property. We would open the floodgates to everyone else, and we would really defeat the whole purpose of designating a property. Thanks.
Further comments? And seeing none. A motion on the floor. It's been seconded. I ask council to consider it right now. I'll turn to the clerk.
The motion fails as it's a tie vote, 8-8.
Councillor Wesley, maintain your motion.
But could you, Worship, I understand there's one that has been made up, that Meredith has.
Clerk's office has the opposite motion on file.
Meredith, I wonder if you can you change the screen so we can see? Oh. Meredith, could you prepare the other one?
You don't have it.
That was the first time we've ever had a tie vote in this chamber.
Okay. Would you like me to read it, Your Worship?
Yes, please.
Okay. Heritage Designation Bylaw 130-2012, 90 Park Street. That bylaw 130-2012 designating Haddington Villa at 90 Park Street, Community of Chatham, part of Park Lot 1, Old Survey, be repealed.
Seconder, Councillor Thompson. I'm going to call the question. Let's see what happens with the vote. I'm going to call the question. Ask council now to consider the motion before you. I'll turn to the clerk. And status quo is what?
All votes are in, and it's a tied vote again.
Legal Services.
jokingly would say, Mr. Mayor, we'll bring this back in 2 weeks and we'll do this all again. But I'm kidding. We'll go away and have to do some legal work and figure out what the next step is. I don't, unless council wants to can think of another motion right now, I can't think of anything. So I would suggest we just set it aside and move on in the agenda.
I set it aside. I'll wait for an opinion back. You report back with a legal opinion to council. Only if it's direction. It's been defeated both ways. Yeah. But I just would sooner have legal services instead of us come back with an opinion as to this. I don't have an answer, nor do I want to try to make one. Not tonight. I can't make a judgment call on this. I don't have enough facts, and I think I need a legal opinion. But he will check the procedures. Okay. Which I was told that we had to have a vote. It either go one or one. It failed this way, needed another one. Which then I go back to revert and I need to ask legal opinion that question. That's right. Okay. We'll discuss and report back to council from this issue. Let's deal with the next item.
Item 14B, motion by Councillor Wesley regarding recognition and naming committee.
Councillor Wesley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Whereas there are many deserving organizations and individuals in Chatham-Kent, whereas prior to amalgamation, the former town of Wallaceburg had a recognition and naming committee, therefore staff prepare a report and recommendations on establishing a recognition and naming committee for worthy individuals and organizations within Chatham-Kent with a report back to council for the June 18th meeting of council.
It's been seconded by Councillor Carmen McGregor. Councillor Wesley, you have the floor.
Just very quickly, you all met Mr. Craig McNeil, who is here tonight. This is his idea. I'm glad to be a part of that, bringing it forward. And I would just like to say one thing, that I thank Mr. McNeil for all the work he's done. And for those who don't know, he did come from Hamilton. He's now a new proud resident of Wallaceburg and Chatham-Kent. But one thing he did do when he was in Hamilton is that when they had the Flint water crisis, he rallied his own community, and out of his own pocket and time and effort, they took a truckload of water to Flint, Michigan to help out with that cause. So he comes from a very good place. Thank you, Your Worship.
Further discussion? And seeing none, I would ask council to consider the notice of motion. Oh, Meredith, could you clear? There we go. To the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 15-1.
Next item on the agenda.
Item 14C, purchase of 525 Wallace Street, Wallaceburg.
Councillor Wesley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move the two recommendations in the report.
It's been moved by Councillor Wesley, seconded by Councillor Foss. Any comments or questions? And seeing none, I will ask council now to consider the recommendation before you. To the clerk.
Motion passes 14-1.
Next item on the agenda deals with Chief Administrative Office. Let's deal with the first item.
Item 15A, Verwinden Greenhouse Buildings, Inc., offer to purchase.
Councillor Vicouterin, please.
I'll move it, Your Worship.
It's been moved by Councillor Vicouterin. Seconder, Councillor Thompson. It's been seconded by Councillor Thompson. Any comments or questions? And seeing none, I would ask you now to consider the recommendation before you. To the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 15-0.
Next item on the agenda deals with Finance, Budget, and Information Technology Services. Let's deal with the first item.
Item 16A, 2017 request for encumbrance is reserved.
Councillor Foss, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move recommendations 1, 2, and 3.
It's been moved, seconded by Councillor Leclerc. Any comments or questions? And seeing none, I would ask you now to consider the recommendation before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 15-0.
Next item on the agenda deals with infrastructure and engineering services. Let's deal with the first item.
Item 17A, Wallaceburg Downtown Parking Review.
Councillor Wesley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move the 1A, B, C, and D recommendations in the report.
Been moved by Councillor Wesley, seconded by Councillor Oche. Comments, questions? Councillor Wesley.
Your Worship, I would just like to say that I would really like to give a big thank you to Chris Teber, Jan Metcalf, Mark Seppi, and everybody else who worked on this, because there was a lot of very different opinions and issues on what the problems were, and they put a lot of work into coming up with a solution that everybody is quite happy with. And I mentioned to the BIA, if there's any comments or concerns, let me know by the meeting today. I have had none, so well done.
Seeing no further comments, I'd ask Council now to consider the recommendation before you. To the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Let's deal with the next item.
Item 17B, Chatham-Kent Accessibility Advisory Committee 2017-2018 Accessibility Report in terms of reference.
Councillor Robertson, please.
I'd move the recommendation that the Chatham-Kent Accessibility Advisory Committee 2017-18 Accessibility Report be approved.
It's been moved by Councillor Robertson, seconded by Councillor Brock McGregor. Any comments or questions? And seeing none, I ask you to consider the recommendation before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 15-0.
Let's deal with the next item.
Item 17C, 2018 Arena Capital Asset Lifecycle Projects.
Councillor Fluker.
Very pleased to move this one, Your Worship.
Seconded by Councillor Van Dam. Comments, questions? Seeing none, I'd ask you to consider the recommendation before you. To the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 15-0.
Let's deal with the next item.
Item 17D, 2018 Clareville Park Lifecycle Project.
Councillor Pinsino, please.
Thank you, Worship. I'll move the recommendation.
It's been seconded by Councillor Van Dam. Any comments or questions? And seeing none, I ask you to consider the recommendation now before you. To the clerk.
Councillor Fluker. Thank you. All votes are in. Motion passes 15-0.
Let's deal with the next item.
Item 17E, 2018 Halls Lifecycle Projects.
Councillor Van Dam.
Pleased to move the recommendation, Mayor Hope.
Seconded by Councillor Brock McGregor. Comments or questions? And seeing none, I ask you to consider the recommendation now before you. To the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 15-0.
Let's deal with the next item.
Item 17F, 2018 Parks Asset Lifecycle Projects.
Councillor Brock McGregor, please.
I'll move the recommendations.
Seconded by Councillor Verkutteren. Comments or questions? Councillor Van Dam.
Through you, Mayor Hope. I turned to the last page on this one, and I still look for some clarification from engineering on this one with regards to the placement of LED lights on the Bothwell tennis courts. Oh, Mr. Bray. I believe my question goes hand in hand with this one, Mr. Bray, and through you, Mayor Hope, because we're replacing LED lights, but I'm not sure we should be focusing more attention on the actual Bothwell tennis court surface itself. It looks like it's in very tough shape. I have pictures if you'd like to see it. I can't imagine people playing tennis at night, but if we played tennis during the day, that would probably be money better spent.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. I'm aware of the condition. It is tough. We've reviewed it with operational staff, and we're going to see if we can repair it under our operational budget lines. If not, we do have a contingency. We're repairing the tennis courts in Wheatley, And if it's beyond our capacity, we're going to move forward and get a price there and would carry forward through the contingency.
I'm sure that's a great answer, and I'm hoping that works as the end result.
Further comments? Councillor Solomon, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. When you're making decisions, Mr. Bray, when you're making decisions to replace tennis courts or redo the surface or put up lights or any of those things, what monitoring do you do of the use of the facility?
In the case of the Bothwell Court, we have monitored. It is very low, and that's why we're hoping that we can fix it in-house. Our prime concern is safety, so that people are using it. It is a safe surface for them.
At one time, I don't know whether it was in the 80s or whatever, there was great prediction that tennis was going to be the boom sport, and these a lot of facilities went up. And it hasn't quite panned out that way, apparently. Although in some areas there is, you monitor it and there's great activity. I just think when we're making decisions and spending money, it might be a good idea to monitor the activity level, and maybe there's better use of money.
That's correct, and we are. One thing that's becoming very active is pickleball.
Yeah, that's a lot
we
different.
resurfaced the court in Pancourt last year just because of the huge increase in pickleball use, and also in Chatham as well.
You did one of the courts at the Doug Allen courts
Yes.
for pickleball, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm glad you identified that pickleball, because everywhere I go, people are telling me I got to have more pickleball courts in Chatham. It seems to be that it's replacing the tennis and more. So I'm glad it's on your radar, because I hear about it constantly about pickleball and how we need more courts here, or repurpose the courts that are not being utilized to more pickleball courts.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to be clear, it's not replacing tennis, okay? It's a sideline, but it's not replacing tennis. But
Okay.
Jeff, very happy to hear that you guys are considering fixing the surface of the courts, because the Chatham courts were redone at the Chatham Tennis Club, Tecumseh School, and at John McGregor, and it's made a big difference. The usage is very high, and the lights are great at night, and I'm sure that the usage in Bothwell will produce some world champion tennis players in the near future.
Now that we're down to this, I'd ask you now to consider the recommendation now before you. Turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 15-0.
Let's deal with the next item.
Item 17G, 2018 Indoor Pool Life Cycle Projects.
Councillor Carmen McGregor, would you like to move that for me? Moved by Councillor Carmen McGregor, seconded by Councillor Thompson, please. Thank you. Any item? No discussion. I'd ask you to consider the recommendation now before you. To the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 15-0.
Our next item on the agenda.
Item 17H, 2018 Outdoor Pool Life Cycle Projects.
Councillor Oche, please. It's been moved by Councillor Oche, seconded by Councillor Fluker. Any comments or questions? And seeing none, I would ask you to Councillor Pinstall, sorry.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just on the background, they need to update. The Thamesville pool was rebuilt about 3 years ago. So it's a new pool.
Thank you, Mayor Hope. I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
On the background, sorry, it just says that the Thamesville pool is 61 years old. Well, it's about 3 or 4 years old.
Okay, I'll correct that. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no further comments, I'd ask you now to consider the recommendation before you. Now turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 15-0.
Next item on the agenda.
Item 17I, 2018 Splash Pad Life Cycle Projects.
Councillor Brock McGregor, please.
I'll move the recommendations.
It's been moved by Councillor Brock McGregor, seconded by Councillor Pinson. Any comments or questions from council? And seeing none, I would ask council now to consider the recommendation before you. To the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 14-1.
Before we move to the next item, I just want to interrupt the council for a second, as most of you have received an email today. Adam is his last night before council. I just wanted to recognize and wish him well in his new endeavors as he moves on, but also to thank him for the hard work and dedication he's put forward to this community. I just wanted to make sure we did this. By the time I got to the end of the meeting, he may have left. I wanted him to hear it versus the thing. But Adam, we do appreciate your time and your effort. You've been with us. We appreciate your insight, and we wish you and your family the best in your new endeavors. Congratulations. I'll now move to closed session report. Councillor Carmen McGregor, please.
Thank you. I have two reports to move. Closed session from Monday, March 19th, and from this evening. In the first report, not present were Councillors Caniff, Leclerc, Robertson, and Solomon. Council directed administration on proposed disposition of land by the municipality or local board with regard to Jarrell Street, Raleigh, 11 Cecile Street, Ridgetown, property in Blenheim Business Park, all of Section 2392C of the Municipal Act 2001. Also proposed acquisition of land by the municipality or local board with regard to 525 Wallace Street, Section 2392C, Municipal Act. Councillor C. McGregor declared a conflict of interest on this item. Council also received information on proposed disposition of land by the municipality or local board with regard to property in the Blenheim Business Park, Section 2392C of the Municipal Act. Councillors B. McGregor and Councillor Wesley declared conflict of interest on this item. There was also proposed acquisition of land by the municipality or local board with regard to Navistar lands in the city of Chatham, 23292C of the Municipal Act, and that item was added to the agenda by a 2/3 vote. And also information received with personal matter about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees with regard to CAO performance review, Section 2392 of the Municipal Act. And then for the March 26th, or tonight's closed meeting, not present were Councillors Herman, Leclerc, or Myers, and Council received information on advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for the purpose with regard to 90 Park Street Heritage Designation Bylaw, Section 2392F of the Municipal Act.
It's been moved by Councillor Carmen McGregor, seconded by Councillor Oche. Any comments or questions? And seeing none, I would ask you to consider the motion before you. I'll turn to the clerk.
All votes are in. Motion passes 14-0.
I'm going to deal with approval of communicated items. So moved by Councillor Caniff, seconded by Councillor Foss. Any comments or questions? Councillor Van Dam, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Hope. I have two questions. The first is to Human Services. It was a letter from Minister Verneil, and it was a good news story in the sense that we received almost $7,500 in safe cycling funding. And I just wondered how that money would be rolled out through our municipality once it arrives, if you knew. And if you don't know, that's okay. You can get back to me, kind of a short notice. I just did see it, and it caught my eye, and I didn't know if it was going to roll out into our trails or whatnot.
Why don't we just wait and collect the information?
I can do that.
We'll report it back.
And then,
We're
Mayor,
just going to bring it back, April. Oh, Thomas, you know an answer to this?
Thank you, Mayor Hope. It is only $7,500, but it will be put toward our trails infrastructure budget and used to expand the trails if we can do that.
Okay. And then maybe you, Mayor Hope, can answer the question about SWIFT, because I believe you sit on that board or have played an integral role in it. And a lot of acronyms in that document. They talk about TSPs and BDPs. And so I wondered, we've been pretty engaged as a municipality in SWIFT. Will we have any technical service providers that come up for funding to participate in SWIFT? And will they have to make a contribution plan as part of the SWIFT network? And you can get back to me on that, too.
I'll get back to you. Just going through the top of my head, but I know that when it comes to being a contributor, most of them are contributors as of today, the municipality, but there is some, when you're looking at the next round of service, I'm trying to understand what you meant by service providers.
Well, it's interesting because in the introduction, they talk about how, in the second last paragraph, SWIFT is going to announce TSP, so technical service providers that can tap into this technology. And they're going to be awarded to certain municipalities that are partners, and we are one of them. So I just wondered how close we were to maybe landing a technical service provider. And the reason I ask is maybe twofold, because within in East Kent, there is a young gentleman who's working hard to provide high-speed internet, not necessarily in the ground, but on high towers. And as soon as we can get fiber in the ground, he can also work off of that. Right. And this gentleman is moving forward by leaps and bounds, even providing high-speed internet in other counties, such as Huron County. So I know you have been greatly involved in SWIFT through Western Wardens Caucus, and I found that paragraph interesting because I know we signed up a couple years back. So my question to you is, are we reaping some of the benefits of that, being able to have a local service provider integrate that technology home?
So as far as the core infrastructure, that's what SWIFT will be handling is core infrastructure. Those who feed off our core infrastructure through our fiber system, they can feed off it. And there'll be a number of services. There'll be like Tech Savvy. There'll be Cogeco. There'll be even Bell possibly. Or there'll be the other service providers to get to that fiber in the ground and to send a signal out. Because we're not going to be able to lay fiber on everybody's back door. So those service providers that you're talking about, we're going to see a next round of bidding going on. So right now we deal with the main lines because we want to connect all of Ontario, and then we'll go to the next phase, which is the service provider. Don, you want to add in on this?
Thank you, Worship. On page 17 of the report, one of the summary pieces was in Q3 in 2017, there was a pre-qualification of the telecom service providers, and one of the groups that was pre-qualified to bid on any of the pieces across Ontario was a combined application by Tech Savvy and Integris. So they were the pre-qualifying, but there was an open bidding process, and they were selected. We also have a number of the other large telephone companies like Bell and Rogers. They also applied, and they're also considering making investments in Chatham-Kent. So if you're talking about those that are resident in Chatham-Kent, they did have the opportunity, and at least one of those companies did get qualified in that selection process.
So as a follow-up, and thank you, Don, for that, and through you, Mayor Hope, the only component I'm not fully understanding is if we've been awarded a person like Tech Savvy or Integris to do this, how come they have to pay fees into the business development plan of SWIFT? I don't quite fully understand that because they're awarded the contract, but yet it seems like they have to pay back into it. And I'll leave that with you. We can have a chat in the hallway sometime. Yeah, and that's only fair. But I guess at least keep your thumb on it and see how we can maybe cap in on that better.
Okay. So noted. Any others on the approval of communicated items? Motion to receive for information. So moved by Councillor Bach-McGregor, seconded by Councillor Oche. Any comments or questions? All those in favor? Opposed? If any, and it's carried. Into your non-agenda business items. Then seeing none. And the bylaws, we're going to be amending the reading of the bylaws. There's none in there? Okay. I thought one was in there, but okay. First reading. First and second reading. So moved by Councillor Solomon, seconded by Councillor Cooterin. Any comments or questions? All those in favor? Opposed? If any, and it's carried. Shall council go into committee? Third and final reading. So moved by Councillor Pinsino, seconded by Councillor Fluker. All those in favor? Opposed? If any, and it's carried. Resolution of council. Councillor Carmen McGregor, please.
Thank you. I'd move that Chatham-Kent Council adjourn to its next meeting to be held on Monday, April 9th, 2018 at Chatham-Kent Council, and that Chatham-Kent Council authorize itself to meet in closed session on that day to discuss any matters permitted by the Municipal Act.
It's been moved by Councillor Carmen McGregor, seconded by Councillor Bondi. All those in favor? Opposed, abstaining, carried, and good night.